Chapter 530. Due to the location of the swamp and their unique fighting style, the warriors of the swamp had a special affection for magic beasts. Thorn Southern Heaven could see that little gold lightning was different from the rest. What made Thorn Southern Heaven especially surprised was that the powerful Thunderbird was actually not an adult yet. This was simply an inconceivable matter. It was too miraculous. An illusion? It must be an illusion. Thorn Southern Heaven suddenly discovered a problem. That Thunderbird was similar to his own mount. The strength they possessed couldn't be linked to their age. This kind of phenomenon went against common sense. Thorn Southern Heaven, who was well versed in the habits of all kinds of magic beasts, had never heard of such a phenomenon before. More importantly, these two mystical magic beasts had some kind of connection with that young man called Raphael, especially his own mount. As long as one wasn't blind, they would be able to see that Raphael had known it for a long time. Thorn Southern Heaven couldn't help but gnash his teeth. He had gone through untold hardships to obtain his mount, but in the blink of an eye, it had become someone else's pet. Why? Hanjin naturally didn't know that it was precisely because of him that Thorn Southern Heaven was in such a miserable mood. At this moment, he was somewhat baffled as he observed this young leader. Why did he look so foolish? One of the tribe's patriarchs couldn't bear to see Thorn Southern Heaven's soulless appearance any longer. He walked to the side and whispered a few words. Thorn Southern Heaven then reluctantly withdrew his gaze. Actually, we came here for two purposes. One is to resist the invasion of the abyss together with you. The other is so that everyone can sit together and carefully discuss the future of the Freedom Federation and the Alliance. When it came to serious matters, Thorn Southern Heaven seemed to become a completely different person. His expression was solemn as he spoke to Camarak. We should sit down and talk, Camarak agreed. Camarak agreed. Compared to the invasion of the abyssal race, the conflict between the two sides seemed to have become less important. The decades of war had also lost all meaning at this moment. Under unprecedented pressure, everyone realized that there was only one path to take, and that was to unite and face the outside world together. However, this matter was easy to say, but in reality, it wasn't so simple. Although they had repelled the abyssal army's attack this time, it did not mean that they had completely won. The crisis still existed. Thorn proposed to negotiate at this time because he wanted to occupy a dominant position in this negotiation. However, he was not the only one with such thoughts. But Kyle Morick changed the topic. The Freedom Federation is now under the jurisdiction of Sir Raphael, so I don't have the right to decide on this matter. With that, Kyle took a step back and let Hanjin in front of him. What? Thorn couldn't believe his ears. How could this be? The patriarchs of the other tribes were also shocked by this news. After fighting with the Freedom Federation for several decades, they knew better than anyone what kind of strength their opponents possessed. Could it be that Kemeraki had gone crazy? He actually handed over such a large territory to a young man. One had to know that the Freedom Federation's wealth had always been coveted by the Tribal Alliance. This time, they had come to reinforce the Freedom Federation in order to resist the invasion of the Abyss, but they had to admit that they also wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to leave the swamp. Think about it. The Freedom Federation was the first to bear the brunt of the invasion of the Abyss race. Their military strength was bound to be much weaker than before. Under such circumstances, it should have been very difficult to refuse the Tribal Alliance's request. Or rather, they no longer had the strength to refuse. However, all of this had been taken away by someone else. The Tribal Alliance's people immediately looked at Hanjin, trying to figure out something from this young man. I don't know what happened between you all. Hanjin smiled and said, but I think that for now, everyone should put aside their grudges and join forces. You mean? Thorn's expression became vigilant. Everyone present was very clear that joining forces was naturally necessary, but the crux of the problem was how to do so. There are some things that are still too early to discuss, isn't it? Hanjin's smile seemed to contain an indecipherable meaning. Instead of everyone standing here discussing these unimportant matters, I think it would be better to think about how to deal with the flame tyrant Lonker. Hanjin's words were equivalent to the majority of the people present. Even Kemaraka's old face turned red without anyone noticing, and the tribal alliance's people revealed expressions of anger. So you're the only one who cares about the big picture, while we're just a bunch of clowns who only know how to fight for power. Some things could only be thought about and not spoken out loud. Everyone here was smart, so is there a need to speak so bluntly? How can you be so sure that the flame tyrant will definitely come? A tribal chief was the first to speak up. Then who do you think will come? Such a large army. It's impossible for there to be no commander. Let me think. Maybe it'll be Donald. Kemarak made a show of analyzing the situation. There was no need for Hanjin to refute him. He couldn't charge at the front during a battle, so now was his chance to show off. The tribal chief was immediately speechless. If it was Donald who came, that was simply too terrifying. The tribal chief refused to let himself think about it any further. Even if the flame tyrant comes, Lord Raphael shouldn't be afraid, right? It wasn't clear if it was because Hanjin had stolen his mount, or because he was dissatisfied with Hanjin's attitude, but Thornsouth's words were filled with hostility. Did I say I was afraid? I'm just a little worried. Up until now, whenever Hanjin saw Thornsouth's cherry lips, he would have the urge to laugh. However, if he really did laugh, it would be too disrespectful. Hanjin could only force himself to hold it in. However, the slight upward curve of his lips revealed a trace of his true thoughts. Thornsouth barely managed to control himself. Lord Raphael is someone who can even defeat a fallen angel. Dealing with a trifling flame tyrant is just a small matter. That's true. Hanjin's expression didn't change at all. He was still smiling. Thornsouth was speechless. Too arrogant. Too arrogant. However, the other party had the capital to be arrogant. He could only listen. Since you can deal with the flame tyrant yourself, then what are we doing here? Let's just go back. A tribal chief couldn't help but say, if you don't know how to speak, then don't speak. Shut up. Thornsouth shouted. The invasion of the Abyss Army is a matter for the entire surface race. There's no reason for the Freedom Federation to bear it alone. What we need are partners who can share life and death with us. Remember, I didn't bring you here to be bandits who loot a burning house. If that's what you think, then F***CK off. The tribal chief's face turned red from the scolding. He refuted, I didn't say anything. You think you can hide your thoughts from me? You think you can hide it from them? Thornsouth first pointed at his cherry lips, then at Hanjin. I know that you're not the only one with such thoughts, but I hope that you can set your sights further. Don't be petty like a woman. If the surface race is defeated in the end, you won't even have a single hair left. What's the point of thinking so much? So what if I'm a woman? Yelena was furious. She glared at Thornsouth fiercely. Unfortunately, this was a three-way meeting, so she couldn't just interrupt. Otherwise, she definitely wouldn't let him off. Good, good. Hanjin stretched out his hand and patted Thornsouth's shoulder. He admired this great leader more and more. At least he didn't lose himself in the conflict of interests. Let's go. We'll talk inside the city, Honduras said in a timely manner. Asterisk, 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 the gates of hell, which had been silent for a long time, changed again. Flames flickered and smoke rolled. A moment later, a thick leg stepped out, followed by a black robe. Then, two straight and sharp horns appeared in the smoke. Finally, a ferocious face appeared. It was an abyssal great demon. His body was tall and burly. When he stood there with his legs spread apart, he gave off an unshakable feeling. His eyes were different from the other abyssal demons. They were dark, like a bottomless pool. However, the scythe in his hand was a little damaged, as if he had just experienced a thrilling battle. In a moment, one after another, abyssal great demons appeared one after another. They lined up behind the great demon leader, and there were more than 10 of them. One of the abyssal demons who stayed behind respectfully knelt on the ground and said in a low voice, Your Highness, where's Leonardo? The great demon leader glanced around and asked coldly, We've already lost track of him. The abyssal devil felt a bitter taste in his mouth. It was a mistake to let you keep an eye on him. The great demon leader sneered and then waved to a longhorned demon nearby. The long-horned demon walked over in fear. The great demon stretched out his scythe and patted the long-horned demon's shoulder. The long-horned demon immediately understood the other party's meaning. He prostrated himself on the ground with his hands on the ground and straightened his back. The great demon leader untied his black robe and threw it to the side. Then he slowly sat down. "How's the battle in front? Where are the princes?" "It seems to have been defeated." The abyssal demon felt that his tongue was becoming more and more uncontrollable, and it was becoming more and more difficult to speak. "Seems to have been defeated?" The great demon in the lead sneered again. The defeated abyssal army had already appeared on the horizon in the distance. Everything was self-evident. The great demon narrowed his eyes and asked, "Let me ask you, where are the princes?" The abyssal demon was tongue-tied. He wanted to say that since he hadn't seen the princes until now, they were probably dead. However, he didn't dare to say it out loud. The prince in front of him had always been known for being cruel and tyrannical. Once he really got angry, he would definitely kill him without any explanation. Moreover, he would kill him for nothing. No one would seek justice for him. "I understand." The great demon leader let out a deep sigh. His dark eyes seemed to become moist. Then he muttered to himself, "Defeated, all defeated." The great demon's head drooped lower and lower. Finally, his gaze fell on his chest. There was a ghastly wound that extended from his left shoulder to his right rib. It looked like a sword wound. If the sword had cut deeper, it would have almost cut him in half from his shoulder to his back. He didn't know when he had been injured, but the wound still hadn't healed. The torn muscles, countless blood vessels, and green and white veins made one's scalp tingle. What was even more strange was that there were countless stars flickering in the wound. It was like a miniature version of the Milky Way. "Your Highness, it's great that you've come to support us." "Huh, that Raphael is dead for sure." The abyssal demon pretended to be happy and shouted, "Me?" The great demon leader's lips curled up slightly, revealing a playful smile. "I'm in such a sorry state right now. Can I still fight?" The abyssal demon seemed to have just seen the other party's wound. He cried out in alarm, "Your Highness, you're injured? Quick, quick, someone come and bandage my lord's wound." Just as a long-horned demon came over, the great demon swung his arm and heavily slapped the long-horned demon's face. The long-horned demon's body was suddenly lifted off the ground and flew dozens of meters away. It fell heavily to the ground and didn't move anymore. "Idiot, if I could bandage it, I would have done it already," the great demon leader coldly said. The abyssal demon was given a fright and didn't dare to speak again. "My lord, let us go out and find Leonardo," another great demon said in a low voice. "It's useless. You won't be able to find him." The great demon leader shook his head. "A bastard will always be a bastard. We should have gotten rid of him long ago. He'll come back sooner or later." The great demon who spoke had a different opinion. "Leonardo is an abyssal demon. The surface races can't accept him. Where can he hide? What if he doesn't hide?" The great demon leader revealed a cold smile. "Doesn't hide? Could it be that he'll defect to Raphael's side?" The great demon who spoke was frightened by his own guess and became dumbfounded. Leonardo was the leader of the Hell Purple Flower. If the head of an intelligence agency defected, it would cause immeasurable damage and losses. "I said before that bastard Leonardo can't be trusted." The great demon leader fiercely stabbed his scythe into the ground. But Big Brother is too indecisive. You can't blame His Majesty." Another great demon softly said, "Among the younger generation, Leonardo's ability is the most outstanding, far surpassing the prince's. Otherwise, His Majesty wouldn't have let him control the Hell Purple Flower." The great demon leader didn't refute. He only revealed an expression of pity and anger. This evaluation wasn't wrong. It could only be blamed on the princes for not being able to live up to expectations. Otherwise, why would Big Brother spend so much effort to raise a bastard? "My lord, what should we do?" a great demon said. "Leonardo knows too many secrets. If he comes into contact with Raphael, The consequences will be unimaginable. What can we do? The great demon leader said coldly. Attack Esnearly City? My lord, we can try. Nonsense. The great demon leader said sternly. Big Brother repeatedly said that our mission is only to restrain Raphael. My lord, His Majesty probably said that because he's worried that we'll be too impulsive. Otherwise, why would he send us here? The flame tyrant Lonker is enough to restrain Raphael. Aren't we superfluous? The great demon leader closed his eyes. After a long while, he said slowly, "You're right." At this moment, the longhorn demon that the great demon leader was sitting on suddenly wailed. Then, a blood-red round mirror appeared in the blood mist. The great demon leader hurriedly jumped up and turned around. He said in shock, "Big Brother, you're continuously releasing." Before he could finish, he was already stunned. Donald, who appeared in the blood-red round mirror, looked extremely defeated. No one knew if it was because he had exhausted too much energy or because he was worried about the danger his children were in. "Johnson, is there any news about them?" Donald asked softly. "Not yet." The great demon leader was stunned. He hurriedly replied without thinking. Donald's eyes flashed. Obviously, the great demon's expression couldn't escape his observation. Then, the corners of Donald's eyes drooped at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye. In just a short time, Donald looked a lot older. After being stunned for a long time, Donald changed the topic. "Where's Leonardo?" "He's not back yet." Johnson's voice was even lower. "Johnson, how should I say this?" Donald said faintly. "Today is a disaster for us demons." "Big Brother, what's wrong?" Johnson's eyes widened. In his memory, he had never seen his big brother look so disheartened. "I just saw Hani. Second brother is back." "The mission failed. He's also heavily injured." Donald shook his head slowly as he said this. "How is that possible?" Johnson couldn't help but shout. "Second brother brought so many people. How could he not be able to deal with Frost Dragon Ankiel?" "There's more than one Ankiel," Donald said softly. "Shozo, Harriet, Contract, Weber, Dragon City. These guardians are all in Lost Valley. There are also many Dragon City elders. Johnson swallowed his saliva with difficulty. "Are they crazy? Fan Lunding is attacking Dragon City and Dragonfield. Why are they in Lost Valley?" "They should be looking for an opportunity to integrate," Donald said. "Don't forget, Frost Dragon Ankiel has a special identity." Johnson didn't know what to say. The two brothers looked at each other speechlessly. After a while, Donald broke the silence. "Johnson, our morale has fallen to the lowest point. We can't go on like this. We need a glorious victory." "Big Brother, I understand what you mean." Johnson nodded hard. "No, you don't understand." Donald said softly. "I'm talking about." Chapter 531. "Well done, Harley." Hanjin nodded his head slowly. This was probably the first time Hanjin had praised Harley's results in such a tone. Harley was so excited that he shook his head and smiled foolishly, unable to say a word. In the magic laboratory, dense fire elements flowed quietly, and the flashing red light gave off a sticky feeling. Hanjin slowly extended his left hand, paused for a moment, and then began to conjure a spell. The word calamity in his palm suddenly emitted a dazzling light, and the fire elements flowing in all directions seemed to be summoned, slowly squeezing over from all directions. Hanjin's expression became especially solemn. Although his heavenly apocalyptic fire was only a few fire elements away from completion, the last step was also the most crucial one. Many powerful magic weapons or life forms would be repelled by the laws of nature when they were formed. In the words of another world, it was to steal the fortune of the heavens and earth, invade the mysteries of the sun and moon, and not be tolerated by ghosts and gods. It was different from the heavenly Tao, which was tempered by the heavenly tribulations. He had already triggered the backlash of the heavens and earth, and this was the first time he had personally created a talisman that could kill gods and Buddhas. Although it was not a true magic treasure, and the scale of the backlash should be much smaller, he still did not dare to be careless. Suddenly, Hanjin's palm emitted a red light, which then turned orange and then immediately turned golden. The light flame was retracted and quickly collapsed into Han Jin's palm, finally turning into a thick black. The entire magic laboratory was suddenly pitch black, and only the countless crystals of ignition elements could be seen floating in the air. Harley was shocked. He looked around, but found that Han Jin's figure had already disappeared. He knew that Han Jin was creating a magic tool, so he suppressed the urge to speak and kept his mouth shut. Outside the god of war, the darkness was quickly spreading, and the biggest impact was in the city hall of Nearly City. Kamaratsi and Honduras held a grand banquet to entertain their allies. Suddenly, the entire hall became pitch black. Everyone could see the magic lamps on the walls and the candles on the dining table, but they could not see each other. It was as if everyone except themselves had disappeared, or they had suddenly been projected into another strange world. What's going on? Honduras couldn't help but exclaim. Honduras's call was timely. Everyone heard Honduras's voice and felt a little relieved. If there was no movement for a long time, most people would probably be scared. Is Harley casting the spell? Green asked slowly. I don't smell any rotting bones. Adolf replied. He didn't want to attend this banquet, but Kamaratsi, Honduras, and the others had invited him. Although he didn't care about their feelings, Han Jin had spoken, so he had no choice but to reluctantly come. I've never seen this kind of magic before, Major Domo Gale murmured. It should be... What is Lord Raphael doing? It's possible, Gaobin said. Garen raised his right hand and cast illumination. A spot of light flickered in the hall before disappearing. It was still pitch black. Interesting. Green couldn't help but laugh. The powerhouses found this phenomenon interesting, but the civilians couldn't. The black veil had enveloped the whole city, taking away all the light. The adults could still barely keep calm, but some children were scared. They either hid in their parents' arms or simply cried out loud. The repaired wizard towers in Nearly City were activated one after another, but the magic circle couldn't stop the invasion of the Black Veil. Soon, the camp of the Tribal Alliance outside the city was also affected. The soldiers could see the flames on the torches, but they couldn't see any light. After being stunned for a moment, the soldiers pulled out their weapons one after another. The sound of weapons clashing could be heard in every corner. The herds of armored bulls also snorted uneasily. The wyverns spread their wings in fear, but they didn't dare to fly. They could only roar. If the Black Veil lasted a little longer, who knew what would happen? Fortunately, the Black Veil faded little by little after a dozen breaths, and light returned to the world. In the magic lab, Harley could finally see Han Jin. In such a short time, Harley found that Han Jin's face had changed greatly. A row of small beads of sweat appeared on his forehead, and his frozen fingertips were trembling slightly. Master, Harley whispered. It's okay. Han Jin let out a long breath, but his eyes still looked a little dazed. It seemed that he hadn't recovered yet. In Nearly City, a figure also let out a long breath and murmured, Is this magic from another plane? The Black Veil was so strange that he forgot what he was going to do and that the target was just a few meters away from him. Who is it? A few warriors of the Tribal Alliance turned around and shouted. Leonardo smiled and rushed forward. The tip of his foot touched the back of the armored bull's waist, and the short sword in his hand swept towards the bull knight's face like lightning. The bull knight didn't dodge the attack. Instead, he crossed his hands and used the handle of his mace to stab at Leonardo's chest. However, the bull knight's movements were clearly slower than Leonardo's. As soon as the mace stabbed out, the back of Leonardo's sword had already slapped his cheek. With a crisp sound, the bull knight fell off the bull's back. Leonardo's figure disappeared and reappeared beside another bull knight. He lightly bumped his shoulder, and the bull knight couldn't help but roll diagonally to the ground. Enemy attack. Enemy attack. The first bull knight to fall on the ground roared, but his words were not clear. Abyssal demon. The bull knight's warning spread far and wide in the night. The camp of the Tribal Alliance immediately became lively. The god of war in Nearly City also rose little by little. However, Leonardo didn't seem to be in a hurry. He took down the bull knights one by one. However, it seemed that he didn't intend to kill them. He punched and kicked them, and the short sword in his hand seemed to be useless. In such an unexpected situation, who would be the first to act? The answer was self-evident. Han Jin. He moved the fastest, and he didn't want his friends to face unknown dangers. Regardless of whether he could handle it or not, he would try his best to take it on himself. Moments later, Han Jin's figure appeared in the distance. Leonardo no longer hesitated. He turned around and used instant transmission to escape into the distance. One chased while the other fled. The distance between the two narrowed. Although they belonged to different factions and hated each other, their expressions were exactly the same. They both had a faint smile on their faces. Han Jin obviously wanted to kill the other to make up for his regret. Leonardo, on the other hand, was smiling at this moment. He must have his own reasons. When the distance between the two was less than 500 meters, Leonardo suddenly changed direction and appeared on a small hill. He then turned around and sheathed his short sword, quietly waiting for Han Jin's arrival. Han Jin's figure flashed, and he appeared more than 10 meters away from Leonardo. He was holding a flaming long sword. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, "Why aren't you running anymore?" "I didn't want to run at all," Leonardo replied softly. "Is that so?" Han Jin said casually. "I like your choice." As soon as he finished speaking, he slowly raised the long sword in his hand. "You misunderstand." Leonardo's expression didn't change, but his tense body revealed his nervousness. "To be honest, I'm here to seek refuge with you." "Seek refuge with me?" Han Jin was a bit surprised. His long sword suddenly froze in the air. He then laughed. "Don't you think it's a bit funny? I have no other choice." Leonardo smiled bitterly. "You're the one who forced me into this desperate situation." "Did I force you?" Han Jin said calmly. "Do you need me to apologize? My brothers were all killed by you." Leonardo's voice became very low. "Ha! I only have one life. I don't want to risk my father's anger. I'm a murderer. Your father should be looking for me. It has nothing to do with you, right?" Han Jin said with a smile. "If it wasn't for me, they would have waited for the flame tyrant to arrive before attacking. Do you understand what I mean?" Han Jin was really stunned this time. After a while, he slowly said, "You're despicable." "No, I'm already very merciful." Leonardo's expression became very complicated. In their eyes, "I'm just a despicable bastard. You don't know, no matter how many people there are around, no matter what the situation is, they'll always think of ways to humiliate me. Bastard is my name." "Ha! I admit that they're telling the truth, but I have my own dignity, don't I? Also, I didn't really want to kill them. I just wanted them to have a taste of their own medicine. Who would have thought that? You have such terrifying power. Even the great demon of the abyss couldn't escape." Han Jin's gaze slowly moved away from Leonardo and looked at the night sky. After a moment of silence, he said softly, "Seeking refuge with me might not be a good choice." "You mean?" Leonardo was shocked. "You should hide in a place where no one can find you. That's the only way to ensure your safety." "Ha! I'm the only one. If I hide in a corner, no one will notice me. I'll also do my best to avoid anyone's sight. When I die, the falling leaves will quietly bury me." Leonardo laughed. "May I ask, is that living? Have I really lived before?" "Looks like you don't want to be lonely," Han Jin said calmly. "If I could choose, who would want to be lonely?" Leonardo asked. "Why should I trust you?" Han Jin said. "Also, since you're brothers, why do they hate you?" "I can't answer the first question. It's up to you." As for the second question, Leonardo was silent for a moment. "I'm indeed a bastard, and I'm too popular. Not long after I was born, I attracted Donald's attention. That's why he took me as his godson." "Just after you were born?" Leonardo fell silent again. Obviously, he didn't want to talk about this. However, if he wanted to gain Han Jin's trust, he couldn't avoid it. After a while, Leonardo slowly said, "I've never seen my real father and mother. I only know that my mother is an abyss demon. When I was born, she was already the wife of a demon warrior. So, I'm a proof, an ugly proof of betrayal. Not long after I was born, my nominal father came back and found me. Then, something happened. He wanted to kill me. That's nothing. If it were me, I would have killed the child too. But demons aren't allowed to kill each other. Otherwise, they'll be cursed by the Grim Reaper. I also have demon blood in my body. And then he threw me in a magma. In the end, I had a lot of fun in the magma, and he was very shocked. Of course, this was just my own guess, because he should have already known who my biological father was by then, but he still wanted to kill me. And then he took me into the air and threw me down. Haha. Guess what happened? Before Han Jean could say anything, Leonardo had already continued. I can't believe I used teleportation. God, I didn't know anything at that time. I didn't even have any memories of that period. Everything was based on my instincts. Coincidentally, Donald happened to pass by nearby and saw this scene. He stopped my nominal father. Continue. My poor father. Leonardo let out a long sigh. He must have been so angry that he even raised his scythe at Lord Donald. He must have made up his mind to kill me. He would rather be cursed. No matter who tried to stop him, they were all his enemies. Donald killed him. No, Donald only chopped off his right hand. Leonardo was silent for a moment before continuing. Although Lord Donald was merciful, this was unacceptable for a demon warrior. Not only did he lose his ability to fight, but he also couldn't wash away his shame. So, a few days later, during a clan meeting, he did something shocking. He used his scythe to cut off his own neck in front of countless people. I understand that he used this method as a final struggle, but my real mother couldn't accept this result. She also couldn't bear the strange looks of the people. A few days later, she also committed suicide. Was it Donald who raised you? You can say that. Leonardo nodded. You should be able to imagine that I didn't have a good time when I was young. Not only was I an ugly proof, but I was also an ominous symbol. I tried my best to become stronger, to change their impression of me. I succeeded, but I also failed. Indeed, I gained the favor and respect of many strong people, but in the demon race, they still hate me. No matter how much I did and how well I did, they still looked at me with disdain. There are some things I've been thinking about. If I could go back in time, if I had enough power, would I have refused to be born? This is a problem. It's really a problem. If that's the case, Donald must have been under a lot of pressure because of you. Don't you feel guilty about betraying him now? Han Jean asked. He had been observing Leonardo's expression. If there was anything wrong, he would immediately raise his sword and kill him. However, Leonardo's eyes were very clear. When he talked about the past, the pain and sorrow in his eyes were very real. He shouldn't be lying. Donald was only interested in my dual talents. He wanted me to become a blade in the hands of the princes. Leonardo's tone suddenly became a bit agitated. Actually, I didn't want to reject the fate that Donald had planned for me. As long as the princes treated me with a bit of sincerity and respect, let alone being a blade, I would even kneel down and lick their toes. As long as I received true recognition, Unfortunately, they still hate me, especially that Richard. He actually provoked me and forced me to duel with him. That was the first time I resisted. I blinded one of his eyes. One idiot. He was too weak, and he wanted to challenge me? Ha ha ha. Leonardo let out a maniacal laugh. How do you know that I won't kill you? Han Jean said indifferently. Or do you have enough confidence in yourself? A dead Leonardo is just a pile of worthless meat, but a living Leonardo can bring you many surprises, Leonardo said softly. Leonardo said softly. In order to make my blade sharper, Donald gave me the purple hellflower to control. Do you know what this means? Everything about the Abyss world is no longer a secret to you. Even though Han Jin's nerves were as tough as steel, when he heard Leonardo's words, the long sword in his hand couldn't help but tremble slightly. What did you say? The hell, purple flower? That's right, my lord. You must know of their existence, right? The secret of the Abyss world is indeed very attractive. Han Jin smiled, then his gaze fell on Leonardo. But I still don't understand. Since Donald gave you the hell purple flower, it means that you have superhuman abilities and intelligence. Why did you do such a stupid thing? Did you deliberately frame your brothers? Don't you know that this is far beyond Donald's bottom line? Because I lived too hard when I was young. When I rebelled against fate for the first time, it went too smoothly. I blinded Richard, but Lord Donald didn't reprimand me. Instead, he beat Richard up. From then on, no one dared to go against me. Even the princes had to give in to me. Leonardo smiled. So I lost myself. Lord Donald was really good to me. I thought that I had enough qualifications to stand firm in the demon race. I even thought that if something really happened to the princes, I would become Lord Donald's only successor. Unfortunately, dreams are too beautiful, but reality is too cruel. Only now do I know that I'm only fit to be a shadow and can never be my true master. Chapter 532. The warriors of Esnally City and the Tribal Alliance had also arrived, but they were one step slower. The powerful warriors of the Holy Crown City were standing at the foot of the hill, while the god of war was quietly hovering in the air. Although they were a bit discouraged that they only saw one enemy after making such a big fuss, they had to do something since they were already here. Mayor Snorley was about to rush up the hill with his warriors, but Gaobin said calmly, "Stop." Snorley was stunned. In the banquet just now, he had learned about Gaobin's identity, and that Gaobin's sister was about to become the hostess of the Holy Crown City. Besides, Gaobin's strength was far greater than his. He could not afford to offend such a powerful warrior. Therefore, he could only retreat with an embarrassed smile. Thorn South's eyes flickered. Although Han Jin did not bring a large number of troops, the overall strength of these powerful warriors was generally 10%, or even several percent, stronger than that of the Tribal Alliance. Thorn South did not want to stand out, lest he looked for trouble. It was true that many ants could kill an elephant. However, if there were other options, how could the ants have the courage to attack the elephant? Leonardo saw that the foot of the hill was full of people, but he did not panic. Instead, he continued to talk with Han Jin calmly. After a long time, Han Jin and Leonardo were still talking endlessly. Thorn South and the others felt irritated. They were chatting on the hill while they were waiting like a bunch of clowns. They did not even know what they were talking about. It was so boring. Every few minutes, Thorn Tian would take a deep breath. Just as he was about to go down, Leonardo waved his hand and disappeared from the hill. Han Jin slowly walked down the hill. Thorn Tianan's eyes widened. That's it? Was he really going to let that abyss warrior go? The warriors of Esnally City were also shocked. Only those on Han Jin's side could still keep calm. This was the trust formed by long-term cooperation. They knew that Han Jin must have his own reasons. Mayor Snorley, can the damaged Mage Tower in Esnally City be repaired tonight? Han Jin asked. Tonight? Time is too tight. Snorley shook his head. Just do your best. Han Jin's gaze turned to Thorn of the South. Sir Thorn of the South, you should immediately discuss with Sir Kemoratzi and Sir Honduras and strive to move the barracks into the city. Han Jin's words were too direct, as if he was giving an order. This made Thorn somewhat uncomfortable, but he knew that this wasn't the time to throw a tantrum. He whispered, Immediately? Lord Raphael, what happened? The Flame Tyrant has arrived, Han Jin said slowly. The Flame Tyrant is here. Snarly was shocked. How? How did they arrive so quickly? Because they built a gate to hell. The warriors of Esnally City and the Tribal Alliance immediately fell silent. The gates of hell had appeared during the First World War, and it was a huge headache for the ground forces. Their carefully made strategic arrangements were always easily disrupted. Furthermore, since the Abyss warriors had set up the gates of hell here, it also showed their determination to destroy the Freedom Alliance and the Tribal Alliance. Everyone present felt their hearts sink. Asterisk, 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 asterisk dawn on the city walls of Esnally City. A soldier wanted to scoop some water from a bucket to moisten his dry lips, but just as he put his hand into the bucket, he suddenly froze. The water in the bucket, which was supposed to be calm, rippled, and in the end, the entire bucket was trembling slightly. At the same time, on the God of War, Han Jin also seemed to have sensed something. He walked to the side of the ship and looked into the distance. More and more people felt the ground tremble. It was as if countless feet were stomping on the ground at the same time. As the trembling intensified, a red light appeared on the horizon in the distance. The sky was dyed red by the light. Gradually, the scene in the distance became distorted in everyone's eyes. As a light breeze blew, everyone felt a wave of heat wash over them. Moments later, everyone realized that the red light was formed by countless creatures that looked like dwarves. Every dwarf's body was burning with raging flames. They jumped, ran, and converged into a long river of fire, covering the sky and the earth like a tide. It was as if dozens of volcanoes had erupted outside Esnerly City at the same time, and endless lava was slowly burying the entire field. Kyle Morick saw this shocking scene through his clairvoyant eyes. He couldn't even speak. How was he supposed to fight this war? Even if these monsters didn't do anything and just ran around, the Freedom Federation would be destroyed. That was indeed the case. Wherever these dwarves stepped on, the moisture in the soil would quickly evaporate, turning into dry and cracked ground. Even the grass and trees 100 meters away were roasted by the heat waves from their bodies, causing their leaves to curl up. Hanjin also saw the torrent of flames rolling in from the distance. It seemed that these were the evil fire spirits that Adolf had mentioned, but he didn't expect to see such a shocking scene. However, he didn't see any other Abyss warriors. This was normal. Apart from the evil fire spirits, almost all life would be devoured by the lava, and the Abyss warriors were the same. The warriors of Esnerly City were even more useless. Before they could even get close, they would probably be roasted alive. The archers could stand in the rear and shoot arrows, but there weren't many of them, and they didn't have enough long-range firepower. If Hanjin also had hundreds of thousands of evil eyes, this battle would be much easier. Harley piloted the god of war and rushed forward. Hogan directed the magicians to adjust the magic crystal cannons. Then hundreds of magic crystal cannons fired at the same time. Magic bullets drew a beautiful trajectory in the air and landed in the middle of the fire spirits. In the continuous explosion, the fire spirits were blown to pieces. It seemed that their defensive capabilities weren't outstanding, but the flames on their bodies didn't extinguish even after being blown to pieces. Every piece of rock was still burning with flames. The magic crystal cannons kept roaring, and the fire spirits fell one after another. However, the fire spirits didn't seem to care about the casualties of their companions. They ignored the sky full of cannon fire, and it didn't slow down at all. It was as if their mission since birth was to keep moving forward. Hundreds of magic crystal cannons, in the face of the endless torrent of flames, were undoubtedly a drop in the bucket. They couldn't extinguish this sea of fire at all. Hogan stood on the god of war and silently recited a spell. After a while, a whirlwind formed by snowflakes appeared out of thin air. Following Hogan's hand gesture, it flew towards the fire spirits. The fire spirits who were charging at the front crashed into the whirlwind, and the flames on their bodies were extinguished, revealing their dark stone skin. The sudden drop in temperature caused fine cracks to appear on their bodies, and they turned into a pile of gravel after running a few steps. However, the whirlwind released by Hogan was too insignificant in front of the sea of fire formed by the fire spirits. After a while, the flying snowflakes were melted by the steaming heat waves. The fire spirits that followed behind quickly filled the gap, as if nothing had happened. In contrast, Sunir and Yelena's attacks were more lethal. The arrow shot by Sunir carried a sharp whistling sound and flew hundreds of meters away before falling to the ground. It left an empty space dozens of meters wide in the ranks of the fire spirits. This arrow was at least equivalent to the simultaneous fire of hundreds of magic crystal cannons. Yelena's 10 Thunder Descent spell had been exerted to the extreme in this situation. In addition, the fire spirits only blindly rushed forward and didn't know how to dodge at all. In a flash, the fire spirits turned into countless splashes of gravel in the rainstorm of thunder and fire. But this was also the most troublesome part. These fire spirits didn't know fear and didn't have any thoughts. They simply moved forward, and forward again. This meant that unless all the fire spirits were killed, nothing could stop them. Spinder and his mages were also constantly releasing magic. Because the fire magic they used didn't cause much damage to these evil fire spirits, they didn't use large-scale magic. Instead, they concentrated their magic to release the more powerful meteorite spell. Together with Gao Bin, they shot down the fire spirits that had survived the bombardment of the magic crystal cannons and Yelena's thunder descent spell. The fire spirits' advance was finally stopped. The biggest contribution was Yelena. The number of fire spirits that died in her hands was almost equal to the total number of the others combined. The hundreds of magic crystal cannons on the God of War also contributed a lot. Fortunately, after getting Morgan's treasure, they didn't have to worry about the magic crystals. Otherwise, the consumption of magic crystals might cause the economy of the Holy Crown City to be in the red. No wisdom. Han Jin suddenly remembered what Adolf had said. The evil fire spirits were completely different from other life forms. They were born in the ancient lava formed thousands of years ago and had highly developed wisdom. As long as they were nourished by the lava, their fire of life would never be extinguished. Looking at these little things covered in flames, Han Jin couldn't associate them with Adolf's words. Were they not the real, evil fire spirits? Han Jin lifted his long saber and looked around. All he could see was the burning flames. Han Jin faintly felt that there was something hidden in the flames. However, the burning flames on the fire spirits almost sucked up the surrounding air. In Han Jin's eyes, even the nearby scenery became blurred and distorted. In this case, he couldn't see the scene in the distance. Although Leonardo had already warned him, he didn't expect the flame tyrant to attack in this way. The entire plain was burning, making him feel like a hero who couldn't do anything. Charge forward? He wasn't Leonardo. The high temperature that could burn even the air was enough to turn him into a mortal enemy. He could hold on for a short period of time, but he wouldn't be able to continue fighting after a while. Release the talisman? The fire spirits had extremely strong resistance to fire magic. He didn't know if his Red Lotus Hellfire could cause any damage. At this moment, a 2-meter-tall, flaming person rose out of the lava. Han Jin's vision was very sharp. He immediately locked onto the fire spirit, and his figure flashed. Because Han Jin's appearance was too sudden, the evil fire spirit didn't have time to dodge or even react. With a bright flash of a saber, the upper half of the evil fire spirit's body flew up. After being burned for so many years, its skin had already lost its original color. It had a dark glow, and its toughness was comparable to steel. However, it still couldn't withstand Han Jin's light attack. At this moment, one after another, tall flaming people emerged from the lava like bamboo shoots after a rain. They seemed to want to surround Han Jin. However, Han Jin's figure flashed again, and he was already back on the God of War. Hale activated the 5 elements Great Array, and waves of mist continuously rose. He had already grasped the Tao of mutual promotion and restraint of the 5 elements, so he activated the Water Great Array. However, under the scorching heat of the lava plains, it seemed that the 5 elements Great Array would not be able to last for too long. Han Jin's body was also covered in mist. He left in an instant and returned in an instant. He didn't stay above the lava for more than a second, but this second was enough to make him feel unbearably hot. Although the body of the evil fire spirit had already been split apart, its 4 limbs were still trembling slightly. Gradually, the 2 halves of the body slowly sank into the magma. As it was about to sink into the magma, its eyes were still staring fiercely at the God of War. Did it have to be soaked in lava to recover? Han Jin frowned. Sunir slowly drew her bow again, aiming at the place where the evil fire spirits were the most concentrated. On this special battlefield, most of the soldiers had become useless. The tribal alliance's great leader Thorn, south of the sky, and many other tribe leaders stood on the city wall, staring blankly ahead. Their ashen faces were the most effective proof of this. However, this was the time for the elves to show off their might. With an ear-piercing screech, the arrow turned into a faint black line and shot forward. However, no one expected that Sunir's fatal arrow didn't work. A large burning hand reached out from thin air and accurately caught the black arrow in its palm. Following a series of explosions, the owner of the large hand appeared in front of everyone. It was a giant about 6 meters tall. Dark red flames covered his entire body. With every breath of the giant, the flames were constantly inhaling and exhaling. Even though they were hundreds of meters away, Han Jin and the others could still feel the scorching aura. Before Han Jin could react, Baby, who was next to Yelena, couldn't hold back anymore. With a whoosh, it flew out and turned into a ball of burning flame in midair. The undying bird and the evil fire spirit were creatures that controlled the fire element and wouldn't be harmed by it. Therefore, Bao Bao didn't release any magic. He just used his body to crash into the giant, and the giant also flew into the air to meet Bao Bao. With a loud bang, the undying bird and the flame tyrant collided with each other. The two figures separated as soon as they came into contact. The only difference was that one went up and the other went down. The undying bird's body was thrown into the air. Although it quickly regained control, it could be seen from the trajectory of its flight that it had suffered some damage. The giant flame man fell into the lava and splashed a wave of fire more than 10 meters high. Then, he let out a muffled laugh. A moment later, a fiery red color suddenly appeared in the sky. Countless thick lightning pillars descended from the sky, enveloping the space within a radius of several hundred meters. 10 Grid Thundercall. The giant flaming man roared, and the lava around him rose into the sky, forming a huge canopy that blocked the lightning. However, Yelena's 10 Thunder Descent was too powerful, and the canopy made of lava was only able to block it for a moment before it was blasted into a broken sieve. Lightning pillars flashing with golden light poured down from the cracks in the canopy and hit the flame tyrant's body. Instantly, sparks flew all over the sky. Lava shot out in all directions. Only then did everyone see that the flame tyrant's body was actually made up of huge chunks of lava. Under the bombardment of countless lightning bolts, the lava that made up the flame tyrant's body gradually began to crumble. When the lightning dissipated, the flame tyrant's severely damaged body appeared in front of everyone. There was not a single part of his body that was intact. However, he was still laughing wildly and walking forward step by step, as if he couldn't feel any pain at all. A strange scene appeared. Every time the flame tyrant took a step, a piece of lava would fly up from the flowing lava on the ground and fill up his body. After dozens of steps, not only was the flame tyrant's body as good as new, but the flames burning on his body also seemed to burn even more fiercely. Hogan took a step forward with a serious expression. He muttered a complicated incantation, and the surrounding air suddenly became cold. As Hogan waved the magic staff in his hand, the main color of the sky and earth instantly turned into a silver-white color. Frost storm. Countless fist-sized snowflakes fluttered down. At the same time, a crystal-clear ice mirror silently appeared under the giant flame man's feet and quickly spread forward. In just a few breaths, the ice mirror had spread hundreds of meters away. The sudden drop in temperature clearly caused the flame tyrant some discomfort. His advance gradually slowed down. The whistling sound of wind rang out in the air. Borrowing the wind, the snowflakes that filled the sky swirled and surged toward the flame tyrant. Later on, the trajectory of the snowflakes could no longer be seen with the naked eye. The endless pure white firmly wrapped the flame tyrant within. Suddenly, a deep roar faintly sounded from the center of the storm. The lava beneath the flame tyrant's feet suddenly began to boil. The rolling waves of fire rushed up dozens of meters into the air like a volcanic eruption. The snowflakes that filled the sky were instantly melted into countless droplets of water. Before they could fall to the ground, they were completely evaporated by the blazing flames. The mirror-like ice surface also shattered and turned into steam in the blink of an eye. The flame tyrant approached step by step with monstrous waves of heat. Only then did everyone realize that wherever the flame tyrant went, the lava would boil. It seemed that only in this world of lava could he display his true combat strength. Hogan's face was deathly pale. He couldn't believe that the frost storm that he had unleashed with all his might couldn't cause any damage to the flame tyrant. Yelena also flew back with a dejected expression. Her 10 lightning descent also had no effect on the flame tyrant. Chapter 533. Seeing that the powerhouses of the Holy Crown City failed to gain the upper hand, Thorn South's eyes flickered. He looked back at the Wyvern Knight standing behind him. Since they came to Esnearly City, the tribal alliance had been in an awkward situation. The reason was that their fists were not as strong and powerful as others. If they could play a decisive role at this critical moment, they would be able to speak with more confidence in the future. Following Thorn South's gesture, more than a dozen wyverns spread their wings and ascended into the sky, quickly approaching the giant burning man. In order to avoid being burned by the lava, the Wyvern Knights maintained a certain altitude. Looking from the ground, they could only see looming black spots. The god of war was still hovering in the air. Seeing the challenge from the Knight of the Tribal Alliance, Green Zung and the others showed a helpless smile. It was good to want to destroy the enemy, but they were overestimating themselves. After approaching the giant burning man, the leading Wyvern Knight let out a low growl. More than a dozen knights controlled the wyverns to dive down together. The archers behind the knight hurriedly drew their longbows and pointed at the giant burning man. Of course, Thorn of the South didn't have the extravagant hope that a dozen or so knights would be able to eliminate the giant flame man. This was only a probe. If the enemy was really injured, then the Wyvern Knights of the Tribal Alliance would attack in groups. A row of arrows shot towards the giant burning man. The giant burning man didn't move and let the arrows approach him. However, the temperature around him had reached an unimaginable degree. Most of the arrows began to burn before they reached him. Only 2 or 3 arrows penetrated his body before they were completely melted. The giant flame man laughed wildly and suddenly raised his fist and slammed it heavily into the lava. Flames rose from the ground and soared tens of meters, even hundreds of meters into the air. The attack launched by the giant burning man was very similar to the forbidden fire spell, Meteor Shower. However, Meteor Shower fell from the top, while his attack came from the bottom. The dozen flying Dragon Knight were caught off guard. In fact, even if they had been prepared, they would not have been able to block the impact of thousands of pieces of lava storm. Furthermore, the twin-legged flying dragons were only level 10 magical beasts, and their magical resistance was not high. The dozen or so two-legged flying dragons let out mournful howls one after another. The lava was as soft as a puddle of mud. As long as it came into contact with their bodies, it would firmly stick to their bodies and even burn fiercely. In just a few breaths of time, the two-legged flying dragons had already turned into fire dragons and fell from the sky one after another. The knight and archers were also unlucky. Only the 3 knights' combat strength was amazing. They let out unwilling roars and released fighting skills with all their might. The spears in their hands drew out light curtains of different colors, trying their best to prevent the lava from getting closer. The problem was that they could only protect themselves. After losing the twin-legged flying dragon, their bodies had already started to fall straight down. What awaited them below, other than the surging lava that was like an ocean, there were also countless evil fire spirits of various sizes. The roars came to an abrupt end and disappeared in the boiling lava. The dozen or so elite knight dispatched by the Tribal Alliance had not survived. Thorn South's complexion became extremely unsightly. Fortunately, he still maintained a bit of caution and only dispatched a dozen flying dragon knight to probe. Otherwise, who knew how many warriors he would have lost? Thorn South slowly closed his eyes. One of the elite knight was his childhood companion. Their voices and smiles of the past appeared in his mind. Although his companion's strength was far inferior to his own, he was still a powerful warrior widely respected in the Tribal Alliance. Who would have thought that he would be so easily killed by the enemy with a wave of his hand, just like a frail insect? This world would never belong to the weak. Thorn South let out a groan that only he could hear. He must become strong, must Raphael. The giant flame man suddenly let out a deafening roar. In this place, only you have the qualifications to be my opponent. Don't send those small fries to their deaths. Come, let me see your strength. The god of war had become completely silent. Everyone's gaze fell on Han Jin, who was standing at the bow of the ship. The warriors of Esnerly City and the Tribal Alliance were also staring at the god of war in the distance. This was not a provocation. With the level of the flame tyrant, a challenge issued by its own mouth could not be described as a provocation. To be precise, this was a kind of recognition. It recognized that Han Jin was one of the few people who stood at the peak of the world. "You are the flame tyrant Lonker," Han Jin said indifferently. His gaze turned to the horizon and revealed a mischievous expression. Then, he lazily turned his gaze back to the giant flame man. "Of course it's me." The flame tyrant Lonker's attitude was very arrogant. Other than him, who else could turn this place into a lava hell? "You want to challenge me? I hope you won't regret your decision now." Han Jin flicked the tip of his blade, and a water arrow suddenly shot out from the waves surrounding the god of war towards the flame tyrant Lonker. Han Jin's figure flashed and appeared in the middle of the water arrow. The flame tyrant Lonker stood quietly in the lava, waiting for Han Jin to approach. This was not ordinary water, but the 5 elements primordial water. Harley was able to rely on his own strength to protect the giant god of war completely because of the power of the 5 elements formation. However, outsiders could not see the clues. Even the strong people on the god of war did not realize that the seemingly gentle water wave actually contained an incomparably tyrannical power. When the water arrow was close to 100 meters away, Lonker laughed maniacally. His figure suddenly leapt up and fearlessly faced Han Jin. His thick fist also smashed forward with a frightening aura. Han Jin's figure suddenly disappeared from the water arrow and appeared beside Lonker. His figure continued to shoot forward, and the long blade in his hand lightly slashed a deep wound on Lonker's waist. Lonker was injured, but he did not panic. He had already understood Han Jin's ability, and this was all within his expectations. In the next moment, he tried to turn around and attack Han Jin, but the water arrow that he had overlooked had already reached him. Boom! There was a huge splash in the air, and Lonker shot back like a cannonball. The dark red flames enveloping his body were extinguished in an instant, and countless deep and shallow cracks appeared on his black skin. Then there was another loud bang. Lonker crashed into the lava, splashing up lava into the sky. Cheers erupted from the top of Esnerly City's walls. With just one move, the majestic and arrogant flame tyrant Lonker had been defeated. The soldiers could no longer contain their excitement. Although many of the strong people knew that it would not be so simple, they still revealed joyful smiles. After about a dozen breaths of time, the flame tyrant Lonker slowly rose from the lava once more. The dark red flames had already covered his body once more. As expected, the flame tyrant possessed an astonishingly powerful life force. After stretching his body, the flame tyrant Lonker raised his head. His voice was no longer as arrogant as before, and it sounded a little heavy. "You are very fast and very cunning. It's because you are too stupid." Han Jin smiled. He could understand the flame tyrant's anger. If he hadn't attracted all of Lonker's attention, it would have been very difficult for the water arrow to hit him. But what's the point? Even Donald and Catherine can't do anything to me. The flame tyrant Lonker's eyes were spitting flames as he said word by word. "You can injure me thousands of times, but you still won't be able to become the victor. As for me, all I need is one chance. That's enough. At the very least, I can make you shut your mouth forever." Han Jin took in a deep breath. "My lord." A tall, evil fire spirit sensed that something was wrong with Lonker's mood and hurriedly came over. After all, their mission was to restrain Han Jin, not to fight to the death. Scram! The flame tyrant Lonker suddenly raised his leg and kicked the evil fire spirit far away. He then turned to Han Jin and roared, "Come, Raphael, fight me." "Okay," Han Jin replied casually. He flicked the tip of his saber, and another water arrow was shot out. Just like the last time, his body shrank into the water arrow and flew downwards at an oblique angle. "This is no longer effective against me, Raphael," the flame tyrant roared. Following his hand gesture, the boiling lava around him shot up high and condensed into an incomparably thick fire python that flew towards the water arrow. The flame tyrant Lonker was surrounded by swirling lava chunks. If Han Jin used instantaneous movement to get close to him again, he would definitely be burned by the lava. Asterisk boom. Asterisk the water arrow and the fire python collided. Compared to the two, the fire python's body was much thicker, but seemed to be a little loose. Although the water arrow was small, it was incomparably tough. In an instant, the head of the fire python had turned into scattered streams of fire, while the water arrow continued to shoot down from the fire python's body, twisting the fire python into bigger and bigger flowers of fire. The flame tyrant Lonker couldn't believe his eyes. He knew that Han Jin was using water to reduce the power of the lava, but was Han Jin really condensing water elemental energy? How could it have such power? Lonker took a step back. He couldn't see Han Jin anymore, so he was a little nervous. Suddenly, the remaining half of the fire python swelled up neatly, turning into a rain of fire that covered an area of 1,000 meters. The next moment, he saw Han Jin's mischievous eyes. The flame tyrant Lonker's strength was completely dependent on his lava barrier. Other than a black dragon or the rare undying bird, no other life form could withstand the heat of the lava. However, his speed wasn't very outstanding. The moment he saw Han Jin's eyes, before he could react, the blade had already swept past his neck. The head of the flame tyrant suddenly flew into the air. Then the blade flashed again and again. The huge head had already been turned into several pieces and scattered into the lava. The huge body of the flame tyrant also fell on its back and was soon covered by the lava that surged over. This time, it took a few minutes for the flame tyrant Lonker's body to rise from the lava. He looked up to the sky and laughed. "Raphael, I've already repeated this many times. It's useless. I know. I just wanted some peace and quiet." Han Jin smiled. The flames spewing out of the flame tyrant Lonker's eyes suddenly paused. He then roared. Again. The moment he roared, Lonker's body had already leapt up. Logically speaking, the flame tyrant Lonker shouldn't have made the same mistake twice in a row. However, at this moment, Han Jin didn't have the time to think. Even if he knew that Lonker was very likely baiting him to attack, he still had to try. Adolf, who had been silent all this time, suddenly changed his expression. He opened his mouth to call out, but Han Jin's body had already disappeared. "Be careful." At the same time that Adolf warned, Han Jin's body had already brushed past Lonker's body. The bright purple blade light also quietly stroked Lonker's neck. Han Jin had been able to grow so quickly because he had comprehended blade intent. Once he attacked, he would never turn back. He would kill gods and Buddhas. He firmly believed that he could destroy all blade intent. Only when he firmly believed that he could do it would he really do it. If even he didn't believe in himself, then there was nothing much to say. Since he had an indestructible belief, there was no need to turn back. This was also why Han Jin always felt that something was missing when he was practicing with Adolf. His improvement was very slow. However, on the battlefield, even if he was facing a large group of insignificant weaklings, he could still grow quickly. This was because he could release his blade intent to its fullest extent. During the practice, he couldn't really kill Adolf and the two angels. If the action was played extremely slowly, one could see that when Han Jin's blade light came into contact with Lonker's neck, Lonker's body suddenly turned bright red. Han Jin's reaction speed was extremely fast. He immediately sensed that something was wrong, but he didn't have the strength to turn back. Before the blade was released, he could still control it. However, once it was released, his divine sense and had completely merged with the bright blade light. As the saying went, there was no turning back. At this moment, Han Jin was an arrow. If he didn't kill, he would hurt himself. Lonker's huge head flew up once again. At the same time, Han Jin became a ball of fire that kept exploding. The people on the God of War were still in a better mood. They all knew that Han Jin had the life marionette. The warriors of Esnerly City and the Tribal Alliance were all dumbfounded and in despair. Facing the burning plains, the demigod expert Raphael was their only hope. Their hope was destroyed, and what replaced it was despair. Especially the old Honduras, who directly sat on the ground. A moment later, the flame tyrant Lonker's figure rose from the lava once more. He let out an extremely arrogant laugh. Ha ha, Raphael, how does it feel to be bitten by the flames? I know you have the life marionette, but how many times can you release such a magical spell? Don't rush, take it slow. Ha ha, I will let you experience what true despair is. Life marionette? On the city wall of Esnerly City, the big shots looked at each other. Honduras didn't know where he got the energy from, but he climbed up like a young man. That means Lord Raphael is still alive. An indescribable feeling surged in the hearts of the big shots. Before this, they all had different feelings about Han Jin. Some were willing to pledge their loyalty to Han Jin. Some were wary and fearful of Han Jin. And some were thinking about how to use Han Jin's power without affecting their own rights and interests. But at this moment, they all had the same wish. Come out. Han Jin's figure floated away from the God of War. His expression was still so calm, as if the person who had just died was not him, but an insignificant stranger. Donald made a fatal mistake by letting you come here, Han Jin said calmly. Is that so? The flame tyrant looked up at Han Jin. This feeling made him very uncomfortable, but he had no other choice. After all, he couldn't fly. There is a bond in this world called natural enemies. When you see me, you should be like a rabbit seeing a wolf. You should hide as far away as possible, not challenge me. Han Jin waved the long sword in his hand lightly, creating a dazzling sword flower. Lonker, this is very, very dangerous for you. Raphael, you are a very interesting person. Ha ha. The flame tyrant laughed loudly. He thought that he had completely restrained Han Jin. This kind of threat was too childish. I have been stalling for time because I need enough water elements. Now, the game is over. Although Han Jin's voice was indifferent, it had an indescribable penetrating power, echoing in the sky above the sea of fire and Esnerly City. By the way, Lonker, did you carefully listen to today's weather forecast before you set off? Weather forecast? What is that? The flame tyrant Lonker was stunned. Ignorance is the scariest thing. Han Jin's gaze turned to the sky. Actually, even if you have listened to the weather forecast, it is useless. The ground beneath your feet and the sky have to listen to me. Han Jin's words were like scolding the entire world. The people on the God of War looked at each other. They also didn't understand what a weather forecast was. In the end, everyone's gaze fell on Zhonglin and Adolf, who asked them to have such authority in the field of magic that they couldn't ignore. Zhonglin coughed dryly and looked away as if nothing had happened. Adolf still stood there quietly, his face calm, as if he hadn't heard Han Jin's words. As for what he was thinking, only he knew. Lonker, get ready to cry. A smile appeared at the corner of Han Jin's mouth. The next moment, Han Jin pointed his long sword at the sky. Wind, rise. The slightly gloomy sky suddenly began to roll, as if there was an invisible giant hand stirring the clouds. Then, a strong wind blew from the far northwest. The wind grew stronger and stronger, blowing away all the steam. Layers of creases appeared on the flowing lava. The hundreds of flags on the walls of Esnerly City were all madly fluttering in the wind. Countless evil fire spirits smelled something terrifying and raised their heads to look at the sky. The flame tyrant was no exception. At some point in time, the sky had become as heavy as the bottom of a pot. The entire world seemed to have suddenly turned from day to night. Chapter 534. Lightning. Han Jin pointed his long sword at the sky again. A thick bolt of lightning that seemed to split the sky in half suddenly bloomed, illuminating the sinister clouds. Soon after, thunderclaps rang out. Bolts of lightning flashed one after another. The entire world had turned pitch black. Other than the flickering flames on the fire spirits, the lightning was the only source of light. The storm grew more and more violent. Suddenly, countless raindrops fell from the sky like thousands of silver arrows amidst the dancing lightning. Raphael, you want to use this kind of magic to defeat me? Dream on. Flame Tyrant Lonker let out a deafening roar. Come, I'll show you the power of hellfire. The lava on the plains began to boil. The falling raindrops evaporated into water vapor before they even touched the lava. However, this was only the beginning. The rising water vapor quickly cooled down and was wrapped in the rain before falling again. No matter how powerful Flame Tyrant Lonker was, he could only stop the rain from approaching. He couldn't completely eliminate the water element. Every drop of water vapor that rose up meant that Lonker had expended a bit of energy. As the saying goes, many a little makes a mickle. The sky above the plains was completely covered in water vapor. Every minute of delay meant that Lonker had paid a huge price. However, the water vapor wouldn't disappear. Only a small part of it drifted away. Most of it would turn back into rain after cooling down. It could be said that Lonker's defeat was only a matter of time. The warriors on the walls of Esnerly City all retreated. The water vapor that drifted over was extremely hot. If they accidentally inhaled it, they would feel an unbearable pain in their throats. It was even more terrifying than poison gas. The poison would take some time to take effect. If they stayed in the hot water vapor for even a moment, they suspected that they would be cooked alive. The water vapor outside the city had already formed a pillar of air that was several thousand meters thick. The entire plain seemed to have become the crater of a volcano. Countless evil fire spirits, including the Flame Tyrant Lonker, had been completely submerged. Only pained howls could be heard. Reality proved that it wasn't Hanjin who was dreaming, but Flame Tyrant Lonker. He originally thought that it was just an unknown water element forbidden spell cast by Hanjin. After all, the water element was limited. As long as he clenched his teeth and persevered, he would be able to survive with the help of hellfire. However, the rain became heavier and heavier. In the end, it became a torrential downpour. It didn't fall one drop at a time, but in sheets. He really couldn't hold on. Lonker, if you've never learned how to swim, I suggest you pray to death. Hanjin's laughter came from the sky. Another bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating Hanjin's figure. His cloak danced wildly in the storm, but his figure stood still in the air like a nail. He held a long sword in his hand, looking like a reborn demon god. The warriors in Esnerly City could still feel a heavy pressure. Thorn wiped the rain off his face. Wasn't Raphael a warrior? When did he become a magician? However, this storm was indeed beautifully done. Extremely beautifully. Finally, the flowing lava began to recede. Of course, no one else could see it. Only Hanjin immediately sensed the change. He slowly moved and stared at Flame Tyrant Lonker from afar. He had to admit that a dispute over personal feelings was the most harmful. Hanjin's mantra could only gather clouds, but he couldn't make the clouds follow him. With his current strength, he still needed some time to gather enough clouds. If he wanted to make the clouds follow him, the energy consumption would far exceed the former. Perhaps it would be enough after he cultivated the indestructible golden armor. On the other hand, if the Flame Tyrant Lonker had immediately retreated with the evil fire spirits, Hanjin would have had no choice but to watch. There was no need for him to pay such a high price. But then again, if Lonker had been an obedient fellow, he wouldn't have disobeyed Donald's orders. However, a man lived for a breath, and a tree lived for its bark. Flame Tyrant Lonker was a powerful being in the abyss, second only to the three great leaders. He had just challenged Hanjin, but he was beaten to a pulp by Hanjin in just a few moves. If it were anyone else, they wouldn't be able to take it and would want to get back at him. Think about it. If Han Jin was beaten black and blue by Flame Tyrant Lonker in front of countless people, his reputation would be greatly damaged. Han Jin would also fight Flame Tyrant Lonker to the death. After about 10 minutes, the surging lava slowly left the rain area. The small fire spirits that had occupied the majority had all disappeared, leaving behind tens of thousands of tall fire people. The flames on their bodies had become especially dim, like piles of ashes that had yet to be extinguished. Their skin would occasionally burn, and at other times, black skin would be exposed. They also walked weakly with their backs bent. Flame Tyrant Lonker walked at the end of the lava flow. He lowered his head and didn't speak, but his steps were still firm. As a monarch of the evil fire spirits, he usually considered himself a recluse, saying that he didn't want to fight for the position of the three great leaders. Otherwise, he would do whatever he wanted. Today, he was beaten so badly in front of Han Jin. Just a while ago, he was still mocking Kathleen's incompetence on various occasions. How would others mock him in the future? Suddenly, Flame Tyrant Lonker sensed something. He quickly turned around and saw Han Jin emerge from the black clouds. Although he was very far away, he could clearly see the faint smile in Han Jin's eyes. Lonker couldn't help but be furious. What was this Raphael trying to do? Was there no end to this? However, just as his anger rose, it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Flame Tyrant Lonker understood the meaning of Han Jin's words. Natural enemy, not to mention Donald. Even if Hanny or Johnson had led a small team of demons in a battle, the outcome would have been much better. The evil fire spirits were most afraid of being washed away by rain. This was also the reason why he didn't want to participate in this world war. Donald needed new land, needed to eliminate all threats, and needed to become the ruler of the entire continent. Lonker, on the other hand, didn't need anything. He just wanted to hide in the lava underground and have fun. That was his world. 10 miles, 20 miles, 30 miles. The flame tyrant turned around again, but Han Jin continued to follow behind him at a steady pace. It was obvious that he was unwilling to let the battle end like this. Lonker knew that as long as he showed even the slightest sign of fatigue, the battle would resume. He also knew that the reason why Han Jin hadn't acted yet was because he was afraid of the backlash from his flames. Did that mean Han Jin still needed some time to create a new life puppet? The flame tyrant Lonker turned around and paused for a moment before quickly walking forward. Meanwhile, the evil fire spirits gradually loosened up. They were in groups of 2s and 3s, giving off the feeling that they were a defeated army. Flame Tyrant Lonker wasn't wrong. Han Jin was indeed unwilling to give up. As the saying goes, it's better to cut off one finger than to injure all 10. Han Jin was someone who liked to cut off fingers. If he just let Flame Tyrant Lonker go back like this, what was the point of the battle? Therefore, he had been hesitating. At this moment, a line of fire emerged from the clouds in the distance and shot toward them. It was Yelena, who was chasing after them on Baby. When they were about to reach Han Jin, Yelena jumped down from the baby's back, and the baby slowly circled around Han Jin. Raphael, Mr. Adolf told me to remind you that many evil fire spirits that have advanced have the ability to counterattack. This is their talent, so you have to be careful. Yelena said anxiously. It's just that their strength is different, so the power of the counterattack is also different. But it's still very dangerous. Talent? Han Jin was stunned, then smiled. He understood what Flame Tyrant Lonker wanted to do. Yes, Yelena nodded. Baby, are you afraid of their counterattack? Han Jin suddenly asked. I don't know. Yelena thought for a moment, and her smile became sly. Raphael, you don't want them to leave? Actually, this is considered our victory. Yes, I do. Han Jin smiled. Then, I'll go and avenge you, Yelena said with a smile. Then, she waved her hand. Baby. Baby heard Yelena's call and flew over. Yelena stepped lightly and stood on Baby. She turned around and smiled at Han Jin, then raised her magic staff. 10 grid thundercall. The sky became bright red, and giant lightning pillars struck down one after another, blossoming among the evil fire spirits. Violent shock waves rose one after another, and lava splashed into the sky. Yelena, who was gradually maturing, had fully grasped the essence of guerrilla warfare. She fought while running, and with baby speed that surpassed the limit, no matter what kind of strong opponent she faced, as long as the gap wasn't too big, she had the advantage. She came like the wind and left like lightning, and no one could catch her shadow. Although Bao Bao was injured, it didn't affect him too much. Furthermore, he had learned to stay away from Flame Tyrant Lonker and only focused on chasing after the evil fire spirits. All the evil fire spirits were gathered in the lava. The flowing lava river below was about 10 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide. This was too easy for Bao Bao. In just a few minutes, Bao Bao would be able to make a full circle and release the full power of Yelena's 10 Grid Thunder Call. The evil fire spirits staggered as they ran for their lives amidst the cannon fire that soared into the sky. Every time a lightning pillar smashed down, a group of evil fire spirits would be knocked down. Some of them would be revived in the lava, while others would turn into pieces of black rock and sink into the lava, never to appear again. Flame Tyrant Lonker was both angry and anxious. When he saw Yelena appear, he already knew that something was wrong, but he didn't expect her to attack without warning. If the elemental energy of the lava was still at its peak, he would not be afraid of Yelena's magic. However, the evil fire spirits were already exhausted. In fact, it was already very lucky for them to be able to escape the storm alive. The evil fire spirits were in urgent need of rest, but Yelena was still chasing after them. This was simply adding insult to injury. Flame Tyrant Lonker wanted to fight back, but Raphael was like a silent wolf, quietly waiting for an opportunity. He didn't dare to leave the protection of the lava. Who knew what kind of magic Raphael had up his sleeves? All of the helplessness turned into an angry roar that echoed through the sky. When Bao Bao heard the roar of the Flame Tyrant, it immediately returned an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and a tooth for a tooth. It let out a long and loud cry. Of course, Flame Tyrant Lonker wouldn't fight with a magical beast. He turned around abruptly and ran away in large strides. At this point, he had to endure even if he couldn't. Otherwise, the evil fire spirits would suffer even more casualties. In his long life, Flame Tyrant Lonker had never been in such a difficult situation. Compared to him, Baby seemed to be very happy. It flapped its pair of fire wings to its heart's content and flew to the east, then to the west. Yelena, who wanted to avenge Hanjin, worked even harder. She cast 10 lightning strikes one after another, as if she wanted to release all of her magic power. In fact, she felt a little strange. Flame Tyrant Lonker had arrived at Isnerly City in a majestic manner, but before he could even touch the city walls, he was beaten back by a storm. Logically speaking, Lonker should be the one feeling frustrated. Where did Hanjin's anger come from? However, she didn't want to think too much about it. Hanjin didn't like Lonker, and this reason was enough. Painful times always seemed longer. Yelena didn't know how many 10 lightning strikes she had cast. Anyway, when her magic power was almost exhausted, the two parties had already run for dozens of miles. Scattered black gravel covered the ground for dozens of miles. Those were the remains of the evil fire spirits. Flame Tyrant Lonker had already closed his eyes. He didn't dare to stop or look. If he stopped for even a moment, he suspected that he would immediately lose his mind. Yelena, you go back first, Hanjin said softly. He looked somewhat disappointed. He didn't expect Flame Tyrant Lonker to be so calm. It didn't match his previous behavior. Furthermore, the flames surging on Lonker's body had turned dark red again. It seemed that he had recovered his strength. What about you? Yelena commanded Baby to fly back to Hanjin's side. I'll go take a look at the gates of hell. What are you going to do there? Yelena asked in surprise. The Abyssal race must have deployed a heavy defense at the gates of hell. You have to be careful. I'm going to verify it, Hanjin said in a low voice. Don't worry, I'll come back as soon as possible. Okay then. Yelena reached out and patted Baby's head. Baby, let's go back. Baby's body suddenly sped up and dived diagonally towards the ground. Yelena was shocked and hurriedly shouted, "Baby, what are you doing?" As soon as she finished speaking, Baby opened its mouth and shot out a fireball. Before it landed on the ground, the fireball had already become the size of a wheel. Then, a layer of flames expanded like a bubble, forming a semicircular light curtain about 5 or 6 meters tall and more than 10 meters wide. Then it exploded. The rolling waves of fire swept hundreds of meters away. Countless evil fire spirits rolled, collided, and wailed in the waves of fire like pebbles. The next moment, Baby's body drew an arc in the air and flew back towards Esnerly City, leaving behind a crisp cry. Not to mention Yelena and Hanjin, who were familiar with Baby, even the evil fire spirits could tell that the cry was full of pride. Asterisk, 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 Hanjin didn't cause any trouble. In the evening, he had already returned to Esnerly City. Esnerly City was brightly lit and surrounded by a carnival atmosphere. In fact, when Hanjin chased after Flame Tyrant Lonker, the people and civilians in the city began to celebrate and had been celebrating until now. The people on the God of War were also very happy. After being rescued for the first time, many people in Esnerly City still wanted to do some shady business. However, after being rescued for the second time, the big figures in Esnerly City had to think carefully. It could be said that without the help of the powerhouses in the Holy Crown City, Esnerly City would have long been destroyed. How could it be qualified to bargain with the God of War? However, Hanjin's face was a bit solemn. After returning to the ship, he immediately found Green and went straight to the point. "Mr. Green, when will your magic transmission array be completed?" Green was stunned and asked, "You didn't seem to be in a hurry before." "Why now? Leonardo didn't lie to me." Hanjin said, "Near the Hellgate, I only saw evil eyes, Medusas, longhorn devils, and some flame gogs. But I didn't see any hellhounds or minotaurs. So I took them to attack the Holy Crown City." "Haven't you set up a magic array in the Holy Crown City?" "Except for me, no one can activate that magic array. And the magic array only protects our Holy Crown City. The other acropolises lack defense. If a large group of hellhounds spreads out, you know what the consequences will be. It will be more terrible than a plague." Hanjin said slowly, "The most important thing is, who took those troops to the Holy Crown City? Didn't Leonardo tell you?" "He doesn't know." Hanjin shook his head. "He only sensed the aura of the Abyss demons and then ran away. But he has gone back to investigate." "My lord, do you believe in Leonardo?" Green asked. "No. Since he betrayed his father, he has the reason to betray anyone, even his foster father." Hanjin shook his head. "Then why did you let him go?" "He was telling the truth." Green opened his mouth. He was confused. If Leonardo was telling the truth, why didn't he believe him? Let's put it this way. Hanjin saw Green's confusion. I can use him, and I can trust him to a certain extent, but I have to guard against him at all times. Do you understand? He is definitely not one of us. I understand. Green nodded. Let's go back to the issue of the magic transmission array. Because it's my first time to set up such a huge transmission array, if there is no interference, I think it could be completed in 3 months. 3 months? Too slow. Green smiled. If you are willing to pay the price. Ho ho, I can finish it in 10 days. Price? What price? A few days ago, you killed 4 abyss demons and got 4 space magic crystals, didn't you? You need them? Of course. Do I need fire magic crystals to set up a space magic array? Why didn't you say so earlier? Hanjin took out the space magic crystals one by one, without hesitation. Say so earlier. Even if I said so earlier, you can't get space magic crystals. Even Morgan's secret treasure has. Green was dumbfounded. There were 4 space magic crystals on the table, and Hanjin was still taking them out one by one. In the end, there were 11 space magic crystals neatly placed on the table. Chapter 535. Is it enough? Hanjin asked. Yes, it's enough. Green smiled bitterly. I don't need that much. I only need 5 magic crystals and I can shorten the time to 7 days. Any more than that would be a waste. I wanted to use these magic crystals to set up a magic array, but your teleportation array is more important. Sir, how many magic crystals do you need? Green asked. 7 or 8. The more confident I am. You haven't put it into practice because you are not confident. Green was getting more and more curious. What is the name of your magic array? It's called... Hanjin wanted to say summer mustard space, but Green would not understand it. After thinking for a while, he changed his words. It doesn't have a name. It's also a kind of space transmission magic matrix. The only difference is that we can freely decide the time to travel through the space. If necessary, we can even hide in the space forever. There is such a magical magic array. Green's eyes widened. He immediately understood Hanjin's intention. In the past, whenever Hanjin was in danger, he could always escape with Earth Meld and Earth Shrinking Spell. Every time he fought with the enemy, it was because the people on the God of War were in danger, and Hanjin had no choice but to fight. Since Hanjin's debut, he had never abandoned his friends to escape. It could also be said that this was the most fatal weakness of Hanjin. If the enemy could not defeat Hanjin, they would have to find a way to escape. If they could set up such a magic array, they could hide in it when they were in danger, and Hanjin would have enough room to deal with them. Hanjin smiled and did not say anything. Green was silent for a while and said, Sir, I only need 3 magic crystals. Try your best to complete it within 10 days. I'm not in a hurry, Hanjin said lightly. There are still a lot of abyss demons, right? Zhenglin was tongue-tied. Most of the masters on the continent would feel nervous or disgusted when talking about the abyss demons. Hanjin was the only exception. He had an illusion that the person in front of him was a woodcutter who was telling his family in an indifferent tone that they didn't need to worry about heating in winter because there was a whole forest behind them. Mr. Zhenglin, I remember that there are many teleportation portals in isolated Cliff City that can send mercenaries to the depths of the Holy Beast Forest. If it's so difficult to set up a teleportation portal, I'm very curious. How they do it? The teleportation array I want to set up is different from theirs, Greenzong said with a smile. Oh, what's the difference? You'll know in a few days. Glenn smiled and changed the topic. Your Excellency, you've shown the power of our holy crown city today. Ha! You didn't see Thorn's face in the south, full of sadness, loss and helplessness, just like a sick beauty. How pitiful. Pity? Hanjin also laughed. Don't let him hear this, or he'll definitely fight you to the death. At this moment, a huge golden figure pierced through the clouds under the illumination of the setting sun and landed diagonally in the center of Esnierly City. Golden Dragon. Hanjin and Green Zhenglin looked at each other and walked slowly to the side of the ship. Green Zhenglin had already released his clairvoyance eyes to observe the situation in the center of the city. It was indeed a golden dragon, and on its back stood a fully armored knight. He looked to be about 40 years old, and his face was weary. The armor on his body was damaged, and only a small piece of the cape on his back was left. It was as if he had gone through an intense battle. It's him? Why is he here? Green Zhenglin was surprised. Mr. Green Zhenglin, do you know him? Major Domo Gale came over and asked. Of course. He's one of Nicola's trusted subordinates, Dragon Knight Dick. He's Nicola's vice captain. Green Zhenglin said slowly. I've dealt with him a lot in the past. Nicola's people? Hanjin was silent for a moment and yelled, Harley. Yes, master. Harley hurriedly jumped up from his chair. Stay here and help Dominique. We'll go back and see why Nicola sent people here. Hanjin said. Dominique had brought the Titans and Magicians to the battlefield to collect the spoils. The evil fire spirit was a very strange creature. Little fire spirits didn't have magic crystals, and advanced evil fire spirits didn't have magic crystals either. Only fire spirits that had just advanced would have magic crystals in their bodies. When they truly matured, the magic crystals would dissolve in their bodies, and they would have the ability to continuously regenerate in the lava. Although the probability of evil fire spirits producing magic crystals was very low, it was better than nothing. It didn't take much effort. Sir, I won't go, Greenzinglean said in a low voice. I still need to set up the teleportation circle. Your relationship with Dragon Knight Dick. Han Jin saw some clues. Our relationship is not bad. When Nicola decided to betray me, only a few people spoke for me, and Dick was one of them, Greenzinglean said slowly. He dared to disobey Nicola's order? Didn't Nicola punish him? Han Jin asked. People used to say that Jedis and I were Nicola's most capable right-hand men, but he abandoned us. Sir, you must think that Nicola is a cold-blooded person, right? Greenzinglean's expression became very complicated. I have a feeling, sir, that you and Nicola can't coexist. Sooner or later, there will be a life and death battle between you two. I don't want you to make the wrong decision, so I must make it clear. Greenzinglean pondered for a moment and said, Nicola is a charismatic leader. I'm not trying to speak up for him. I'm just telling the truth. I know. Jedis has told me many times about Nicola's charisma. Han Jin nodded. He couldn't have gained the loyalty of so many soldiers just by being cold-blooded. But I don't know what to say, so I'll just talk about some small things. You can experience it for yourself. Greenzinglean said, Nicola is very tolerant of others, but he is very harsh on himself. For example, in his palace, there are only a dozen maids in that huge palace. The rest are his guards. In fact, it's like a military camp. Every day, he has to train the soldiers himself. Nicola only has one queen, but she died in childbirth when she gave birth to Tinos. It's said that there was a conspiracy. A conspiracy? Han Jin was stunned. A queen actually lost her life because of a difficult birth. This is simply a joke. What are so many priests doing? Speaking of which, it's related to Jedis. Greenzinglean said slowly, Nicola's queen is called Trilinda. Nicola loves her deeply, and she loves Nicola too. But her identity is a bit special. Do you know whose sister she is? Who? Lola. Lola? The one who founded the Lola Alliance? Han Jin was stunned. Yes, Lola, Trilinda, and Louise are sisters. Greenzinglean said, they're all half-elves. Lola and Trilinda had a fierce conflict because of fighting for the right of inheritance. In the end, Trilinda was the loser and was driven out. I've been in contact with Louise. You don't know, do you? Louise is now in the Holy Crown City. I can see that she has a deep-seated hatred for Nicholas. It's not normal. Louise was still young at that time, so she didn't know anything. Greenzinglean laughed. Moreover, the winner will always try his best to vilify the loser. The loser is as ugly as the winner, isn't it? In the Lola Alliance, Trilinda has become the symbol of cruelty, fierceness, and viciousness. In fact, not only Lola, but also Nicola. And you have done the same thing. Me? The Holy Crown City is a very good city. It can be seen that the former Lord Dismark has devoted a lot of effort to it. Greenzinglean said, but now what? At the banquet, those nobles will abuse Dismark in various ways as long as they have a chance, as if they will be more loyal to you. I didn't ask them to do that. Han Jin laughed. I know, but in a few years, Dismark will become a big villain in people's eyes. And you are the savior of the Holy Crown City. You can't deny that, can you? Han Jin sighed. The winner takes all. It was really a pity. How many years has it been since Dismark died? Greenzinglean shook his head. Trilinda was driven away more than 10 years ago. In the eyes of the Lola Alliance, Trilinda has become an old witch. In fact, I heard that Trilinda was very beautiful and gentle. Maybe because of this, she was far from being Lola's opponent. Heard? You haven't seen Trilinda? Trilinda died too early. Greenzinglean shook his head again. She fell in love with Nicola less than half a year after they met. They held a wedding and then got pregnant with Tinos. When Tinos was born, she died of dystocia. This love came and went quickly. Trilinda's life is a tragedy. This is not what I said, but what Nicola said. You said? Trilinda's death is a conspiracy? Although I'm not sure, I dare say, it's very likely. Greenzinglean said, Nicola's strength has been expanding rapidly. At that time, he had already attracted the attention of the Holy Church. On the one hand, Nicola wanted to avenge Trilenda. On the other hand, he wanted to take the opportunity to expand his territory. He tried his best to help Trilenda gather her old followers. Of course, this made the Holy Church and Lola dissatisfied. And then, no one can say for sure what happened later. Greenzingleen said, anyway, when Trilenda was dying due to excessive bleeding, there was no priest in the Iron Fist City. There were only some deacons. Nicola even offered an emergency reward, willing to exchange half of the city for a senior magic scroll of light that had not expired. Not expired? What does that mean? Senior magic scrolls of light are not rare. Of course, masters who often participate in battles would prepare something to save themselves. However, on that day, it is said that Nicola released hundreds of scrolls, but all of them had lost their effectiveness. It seems that there was a supreme master hiding somewhere, imprisoning all the power of light. Greenzingleen glanced at Adolf from the corner of his eye. Other than the Pope, only Adolf could imprison the power of light. What was Jedis doing at that time? Han Jean asked. Jedis was only a cardinal at that time. He was leading the priests to the unsetting sun mountains. After receiving the urgent report from the Dragon Knight, he immediately rushed back on the dragon. But when he arrived, everything was too late. Greenzingleen said, I don't doubt Jedis' character, but it was too coincidental. The priests had all left the Iron Fist City. Jedis was rushing to the unsetting sun mountains, and all the light scrolls had lost their effectiveness. Someone clearly wanted Trilenda to die. Moreover, it seemed that they had already predicted that something would happen to Trilenda. Then, was the difficult birth really a coincidence? Han Jean frowned. There was indeed a conspiracy. Also, the Dragon Realm seemed to be involved, Zingleen said. Right after Trilenda passed away, Shazos found Nicholas and asked for a marriage alliance. He wanted to introduce the most beautiful, kindest, and one of the guardians of the Dragon Realm, Harriet, to Nicholas. In the end, Nicholas refused. Therefore, Harriet has always hated Nicholas. After Harriet replaced Shazos, she often caused trouble for Nicholas and even unreasonably pestered him. These days have been really lively. It's too complicated. Han Jean smiled bitterly. It seems that Nicholas's life is not easy. Nicholas tried to use other forces, and other forces also tried to use Nicholas. As for who would win, it was unknown. In any case, the Church of the Unsetting Sun was the first to be eliminated. However, if all the forces wanted to see Trilenda die, then she definitely had no chance of surviving. Thinking about Nicholas, who was an unparalleled overlord who could shake the world, but couldn't protect his wife, wouldn't he feel heartache? Of course, this was the Nicholas of the past. He had heard from Leonardo that Donald's younger brother, Johnson, had led a dozen abyssal demons to besiege Nicholas, but they were still defeated. Even Johnson was heavily injured. With Nicholas's current power, if anyone else tried to scheme against him, they would definitely be crushed and consigned to eternal damnation. Han Jean narrowed his eyes. Who didn't have regrets? He thought of Edwina. That time, during the treatment, Edwina was almost naked in front of him. After that, the way she looked at him changed. She was always sneaky, panicked, and timid. He knew that Edwina had developed feelings for him, but he already had Sunir, so he could only turn a blind eye to it. When the two vampire queens had plotted against him, Edwina should not have done anything. She should have immediately gone back to find help. However, whether or not Han Jean had deliberately distanced himself from her, she did not want to see Han Jean face danger alone, so she died. Han Jin's eyes became a little moist. A relationship that had not even started had already ended. Unfortunately, he really did not have the ability to protect Edwina at that time, just like Nicholas in the past. After Jedis took over the parish, he gave in to Nicholas on many things. Perhaps it was because he felt guilty. Although he did not know anything, Nicholas's wife decided that she should not have died in childbirth. I know very well that he sent people to investigate this matter, but they never found anything, Zingleen said. As for Nicholas, no matter how much Jedis gave in, he was not satisfied. He was always insatiable because he hated the Vatican. I originally thought that Dragon City would be the first to be destroyed. After all, Dragon City was an enemy. With the support of the Vatican and Dragonfield, he could definitely do it. But he actually started with the Vatican. Haha, this proves that he could not wait any longer. It also proves that he could not maintain his absolute rationality. Han Jin smiled. Zenlin was right. Dragon City should be destroyed first, and then Dragonfield should be destroyed by the Vatican, which was at a disadvantage in terms of high-end combat power. The Vatican would be the last. After all, a life is a life. It is not a puppet that does not know anything. It will always have feelings. Who can maintain absolute rationality? Zingeling said slowly. I've heard that in the past, Nicola was very expressive. He would laugh, drink, slam the table, curse, and even flirt with women. Chapter 536. The continent was facing a world war, and there was a clear divide between the races on the surface and the abyssal races. Therefore, the appearance of the Golden Dragon Knight did not cause panic. However, because the square was full of celebrating people, the dragon could not descend. It could only send the Dragon Knight to a lower altitude. After the Golden Dragon Knight jumped down, it flew up again and circled around Esnerly City. Han Jin, Majordomo Gale, and Adolf slowly stepped onto the square. The crowd parted like a tide. Wherever Han Jin and Majordomo Gale went, the crowd would immediately become quiet. Han Jin's eye-catching armor was easy to recognize, almost becoming his signature. He raised his head and looked at the golden dragon soaring in the sky with a smile on his face. When he wanted to get more dragon crystals, he couldn't even see the shadow of a dragon, but the abyssal demon appeared. When he wanted to get more space magic crystals, the abyssal demon ran away, and the dragon came late. Could it be that the god of fate liked to play this kind of little joke? As soon as they walked up the steps of the city hall, Camerazzi hurried over. When he saw Han Jin, he heaved a sigh of relief and strode forward. He lowered his voice and said, Sir, Nicholas of the Magnificent Light Empire has sent a messenger. You see, I'm here for this matter, Han Jin said. Let's go in. When they were a dozen meters away from the conference room, they heard a low voice from inside. Sir Honduras, I need a definite answer. As I said, I personally agree with your suggestion, but the decision is not in my hands. Honduras' voice was then heard. Are you kidding me? This is a special time. Tell your damn counselors to go to hell. I don't have time to waste on them. You misunderstood me. In fact, those counselors do not have the right to decide. What? You mean? Han Jin pushed the door open and walked in. The conversation in the conference room stopped abruptly. Honduras and the Dragon Knight's eyes fell on Han Jin, but the look in their eyes was different. The Dragon Knight's eyes were full of inquiry, while Honduras looked somewhat flustered. Han Jin walked to the main seat and sat down. After a moment of silence, he smiled and said, Sir Honduras, do you personally agree with this Dragon Knight suggestion? Can you tell me what it is? Sir, this is just diplomatic rhetoric. It's not real, Honduras said awkwardly. When he learned that the other party was an emissary of the Grand Light Empire, Honduras was really excited. If he did it well, he could use Nicholas to restrain Han Jin, and use Han Jin to restrain Nicholas. Then, the Freedom Federation might be able to maintain the status quo. However, it was just an idea. When he saw Han Jin, his inspiration disappeared in an instant. It was too terrible to challenge Han Jin's patience. What's more, although Han Jin had only been in Esnerly City for a few days, he had already gained a great reputation. He was even regarded as a hero and a savior by the whole city. If they really fell out with each other, the nobles would definitely not be a match for the powerhouses of the Holy Crown City, and they would not even be able to control the hearts of the people. Honduras only cared about pleasing Han Jin, but forgot about the Dragon Knight. Diplomatic rhetoric? Not real. Wasn't this a blatant tease? The Dragon Knight frowned and said nothing. After quietly observing Han Jin for a moment, he suddenly said, So it's Sir Raphael. I've heard so much about you. You know me? Han Jin was too lazy to raise his head. He calmly played with the teacup on the table. When I came here, His Majesty told me that you were likely to appear in the Freedom Federation. The Dragon Knight smiled. Oh, the army of the Abyss World is divided into 3 groups. The main force is attacking our Grand Light Empire. The Black Dragon King Valentine is in charge of Dragon City and Dragonfield. The last group is attacking the Freedom Federation. However, the area you are in has not been disturbed. The Dragon Knight continued. His Majesty said that as a demigod rank powerhouse, you definitely won't be willing to be lonely. However, you won't choose to go west. First, your army will have to pass through Grand Duke Solomon's elemental capital. No matter how good your relationship with Grand Duke Solomon is, doing so will definitely arouse the suspicion of many people. Second, your army has no justification. The army of the Abyss World hasn't attacked the Northwest region. Therefore, you only have one path left, which is to go south. Nicholas seems to understand me very well. Han Jin indifferently said, Of course. The Dragon Knight's eyes flashed with a sharp light. You almost killed our young highness. How could His Majesty ignore your existence? Hearing these words, Honduras and Kemaratsi's expressions became somewhat strange. The Grand Light Empire's Nicholas was a young ruler in his early 30s. How old could his child be? Why would Han Jin attack a child? Could it be that he suffered a loss at Nicholas' hands and took his anger out on Nicholas' son? Major Domo Gale and Adolf also looked at Han Jin with surprised eyes. They had never heard Han Jin mention this before. Han Jin slowly raised his eyelids and looked at the Dragon Knight. They had just met and had barely exchanged a few words, but the Dragon Knight had already set a verbal trap for him. If he explained that he didn't want to hurt Tinos, and that it was Tinos who almost killed him, the result would be even more embarrassing. Attacking a child would at most give people the impression that he was cruel, but almost being killed by a child would make him an idiot. This Dragon Knight had some skills. As the saying goes, a single leaf is enough to tell the autumn of autumn. Even a small deputy guard captain could make him look at him in a different light. What about the other generals under Nicholas? It seems that Nicholas misunderstood my good intentions. Han Jin smiled. To be honest, I wanted to save Nicholas so that he wouldn't make a stupid mistake. Save? Your way of saving is too special. The Dragon Knight laughed loudly. If it weren't for Jedi's asking me to stop Nicholas from starting the Battle of the Rising Sun City, do you think I would be willing to go to that damn place? Han Jin's expression remained unchanged. Unfortunately, I was one step too late. Nicholas had already started the war, and the church was destroyed by him. How about it? Facing the army of the Abyss World, does Nicholas regret it? Kemaratsi and Honduras turned their eyes back to the Dragon Knight, and the Dragon Knight's expression changed slightly. He was silent for a long time and didn't speak. This problem concerned all the races on ground. If the church was still there, the chances of victory would be increased. He couldn't avoid the topic. If he said that he regretted it, he would undoubtedly admit that Nicholas was stupid. If he said that he didn't regret it, he would highlight Nicholas as a bad guy who didn't know how to apologize even though he had done something wrong. Who said that the church was destroyed? After a moment, the Dragon Knight slowly said, We just washed away the dirt of the church. Now, Archbishop Zachary has become the new pope. But you allowed Jedis to set up a private church in the Holy Crown City. What is your purpose? Are you trying to divide the church? Lord Raphael, before the Dragon Knight could finish his words, Adolf stepped in front of him and waved his arm like lightning. The Dragon Knight's attention was all focused on Han Jin, so Adolf's sudden attack caught him off guard. He barely managed to dodge, but in the end, Adolf's hand slapped him heavily in the face. With a crisp sound, the Dragon Knight's body involuntarily tilted to the side, but he immediately steadied himself. Following the bright glow of his fighting aura, the Dragon Knight had already drawn his long sword and was about to pounce on Adolf with a roar. Without my approval, he doesn't deserve to be the Pope. Adolf said coldly, Go back and tell that blasphemer Zachary that I must end his filthy life with my own hands. I must. The Dragon Knight seemed to have thought of something, and his body suddenly became stiff. He stared blankly at Adolf, speechless. Ascetics even had the right to depose the Pope, so to speak carelessly and criticize the church in front of Adolf was purely asking for humiliation, not to mention a slap. Even if he was killed, he deserved it. Let me introduce you. Han Jean smiled and said, "This is Mr. Adolf, the ascetic of the church. His responsibility is to supervise the operation of the church and correct the mistakes made by the church in time." If he doesn't recognize Zachary's identity, then Zachary is really nothing, understand? The Dragon Knight took a deep breath, put his sword back into the scabbard, bent over to straighten the chair, and then slowly sat down. Looking at his posture, it seemed that he didn't want to lower himself to Adolf's level. When making a decision, it was impossible to predict the impact of all the details. For example, in the case of Jedis, Nicholas claimed that Jedis was assassinated by Lola, and then he said that the church was in cahoots with Lola. There were many contradictions. The two archbishops of the church, Jedis and Zachary, did have a series of open and secret fights over the succession of the Pope. Since the church and Lola conspired to kill Jedis, Zachary must be one of the murderers. However, after Nicholas captured the Unsetting Sun Mountains, he supported Zachary to become the Pope, which was too puzzling. The most important thing was that Jedis appeared in the Holy Crown City and re-established the church. Although Nicholas announced that the real Jedis had died long ago, and that the Jedis in the Holy Crown City was just a fake and a product of a conspiracy, he couldn't erase the doubts in the hearts of the generals. How could the fake Jedis win the trust of the Light Knight and priests? Jedis' way of doing things was consistent from beginning to end. What he gained in the Holy Crown City, he also gained in the Grand Light Empire. It could be said that except for the magicians led by Zhang Lin, the generals, soldiers, and civilians all liked Jedis very much. Only Jedis could re-establish the church in such a short time. It was a natural influence. The fake Jedis at most looked similar to Jedis in appearance, but his ability was definitely far inferior. What's more, were all the Light Knight and priest blind? After telling a lie, it was necessary to cover it up with more lies. Fortunately, Nicholas was a monarch, so he didn't need to explain to anyone, and no one dared to question him. However, doubts were always buried in the bottom of his heart, and the appearance of Adolf completely exposed Nicholas. Even the ascetics of the church were willing to work for Han Jean, so there was no need to doubt whether Jedis was real or fake. Kemaraz looked at Adolf in shock. Only now did he know that this incomparably old man not only had great power, but also unimaginable power, dethroning the Pope. Although the church's strength was getting weaker and weaker, and later suffered a devastating attack from Nicholas, for countless years, the church had always held a supreme position in people's hearts, even above the monarch. Dethroning the Pope was far more shocking than dethroning the monarch. Seeing that the Dragon Knight was willing to admit his loss, Han Jean smiled. Before he figured out Nicholas's intentions, he didn't want to make the atmosphere too stiff. After a moment, the Dragon Knight suddenly turned his eyes to Honduras. "Lord Honduras, it is your honor that Lord Raphael can come to the Freedom Federation to help in the battle. You must treat Lord Raphael well." Of course. Honduras was confused. Wasn't this nonsense? Not only did he have to treat him well, but he also had to give him the Freedom Federation. Wasn't that enough? "Sir, do you know what Lord Raphael likes to eat the most?" The Dragon Knight smiled. However, Adolf's slap was very heavy, leaving a clear handprint on the Dragon Knight's cheek. This kind of smile was somewhat strange. "What does he like to eat?" Honduras asked curiously. "Lord Raphael likes to drink dragon's blood the most, haha." "Dragon's blood?" Honduras was stunned. "Is that thing delicious?" Majordomo Gale was somewhat surprised. "I've heard Yelena mention it before, but I really didn't know. It doesn't have any taste." Han Jean smiled. "It's similar to pig's blood and chicken's blood." "No way. You've drunk pig's blood and chicken's blood before?" Majordomo Gale revealed a strange smile. Han Jean originally wanted to fight back against this ugly act of exposing his shortcomings. Wasn't it said that a Dragon Knight and his mount lived and died together, sharing honor and disgrace? Therefore, he wanted to compare a dragon to a fowl, but he didn't expect to be dragged into it at the same time. Stunned, he glanced at Majordomo Gale unhappily. "Have you tried dragon meat before? How does it taste?" Majordomo Gale asked again. "It doesn't taste good." Hanjin shook his head and said, "The first time I killed a juvenile dragon, the taste was not bad. After that, I encountered adult dragons. The taste was very bad, rough and coarse. I spat it out after one bite. I probably wouldn't even feed it to a dog." "Is that so?" Majordomo Gale sighed. "What? Do you want to try it too?" "Yes, I do want to. I advise you to give up. It really doesn't taste good." Hanjin and Majordomo Gale were here talking about the taste and texture of dragon meat. But for the Dragon Knight Dick, it was no different from someone talking about how it felt to eat human meat in front of him. He wanted to get angry, but he couldn't. He wanted to turn around and leave, but he couldn't. His mission wasn't to come all the way here to expose Hanjin. There was a more important mission waiting for him to complete. "Master Raphael, have you ever thought about what would happen if the dragons of Dragon City and Dragon Realm heard what you said?" The Dragon Knight said coldly. "What would happen?" Hanjin laughed. "They would go crazy." The Dragon Knight's tone became very sharp, as if he was reminding Hanjin to think carefully about the consequences. Hanjin and Majordomo Gale looked at each other without leaving a trace. Adolph's slap, plus the stimulation from the two of them, seemed to have caused the other party to lose his mind. "You can go and tell them, I don't mind," Hanjin said lightly. "Perhaps you still don't know? Master Raphael." Frost Dragon Ankiel has already woken up from her long slumber. The Dragon Knight stared at Hanjin without blinking. "Dragon City and Dragon Realm will soon unite. Do you really think you can ignore the power of dragons?" Ankiel? Majordomo Gale stared blankly for a moment, then slowly said, "She hasn't appeared on the continent for a long, long time. To be precise, after the fall of Golden Dragon King Milu, the sad Ankiel left the Golden Dragon clan and disappeared from people's sight." Seeing that Majordomo Gale was stunned, the Dragon Knight's eyes revealed a look of ridicule. He had finally turned the tables. "I seem to have heard of this name from somewhere." Hanjin frowned, then remembered. It was Shazos. When he came to Dragon Realm as a guest, Shazos told him that another guardian, Harriet, went to Lost Valley to look for Frost Dragon Ankiel. The atmosphere was a little quiet, and even Adolph's expression became solemn. Clearly, he understood what Ankiel's return meant. "I didn't come here with malice." The Dragon Knight didn't dare to take a mile after taking an inch, and immediately changed the topic. "Master Raphael, if you don't blame me, I hope you can give me some time to tell you what His Majesty said." "Go ahead," Hanjin said softly. "His Majesty said that although we don't have the advantage in the current situation, now is our only chance to completely defeat Donald." The Dragon Knight said, "Donald divided his army into three and looked aggressive, but in fact he made the same mistake he made in the First World War. He is too impatient. Have you all thought about how you would deal with Donald if he united his army and slowly advanced?" Hanjin smiled. He could understand the meaning of these words. "We can't deal with it." The Dragon Knight explained himself. "His Majesty said that if the Grand Light Empire is attacked first, you won't come to his aid. Similarly, if you are attacked first, His Majesty won't come to your aid. The continent has been at war for hundreds of years and has become a pile of loose sand. It is impossible for us to unite. Donald chose to divide his army, which is actually the best for us. We don't need to unite, and we don't have the opportunity to kill each other. We only need to focus on resisting our enemies. Nicholas didn't send you here to form an alliance with us?" Hanjin asked slowly. "If we form an alliance, can you trust us?" "No. If His Majesty can't trust us, then what's the point of forming an alliance?" Hanjin sighed softly. He used to think that he only regarded Nicholas as an enemy, but after talking to Green, he understood that Nicholas had already locked onto him. Hanjin was Trilinda's posthumous son, and Nicholas must have regarded him as a treasure. Moreover, he had almost killed Tinos. This matter alone made him and Nicholas irreconcilable. "Then why did he send you here?" Hanjin asked softly. Chapter 537. The meeting went on for a few hours and finally came to an end. The Dragon Knight, Dick, looked relieved. He clearly conveyed Nicholas's intention, how to settle the grudge between the two sides, or even if the two sides could coexist, these questions should be put aside for the time being. Everything had to wait until the invasion of the Abyss race was defeated. Fortunately, Hanjin was not the kind of person who only looked at what was in front of him. If Hanjin was not interested in Nicholas's plan, he would not have asked so many questions. He believed in his own judgment. Afterward, the Dragon Knight, Dick, did not stay and directly left. The war situation of the Kingdom of Magnificent Light was not optimistic. Nicholas was facing the main forces personally led by Donald. Of course, he also told Hanjin everything that had happened, because Nicholas had told him that if he really met Hanjin and asked him about the war situation of the Kingdom of Magnificent Light, he must tell the truth without a single lie. Honduras sent people to clear the square, and the Dragon Knight, Dick, jumped on the Golden Dragon. The man and the dragon ascended into the sky and flew in the direction of the Kingdom of Magnificent Light. Looking at the back of the Dragon Knight, Dick, Major Domo Gale suddenly asked, "Don't you want to keep them? That would be too petty." Hanjin smiled. "Besides, Nicholas has many strong men under him. Even if I kill them, it will not affect the overall situation. But Nicholas's forces are expanding too fast." Major Domo Gale said worriedly. When Jedis went to the Holy Crown City, Nicholas only had 4 Dragon Knights under him. In this war, 7 Dragon Knights of the Kingdom of Magnificent Light had fallen one after another, but they still had the strength to contend with the main forces of the Abyss army. Obviously, after Nicholas captured Moonlight City, he gained a lot. Lola fled in defeat, and the Lords of the Alliance surrendered to Nicholas one after another. Of course, those strong men also belonged to Nicholas. Moreover, in the past 2 years, Nicholas must have received strong support from the Dragon Realm. The number of Dragon Knights in the Kingdom of Magnificent Light was too much. This war is also disadvantageous to Nicholas. He still hasn't fully digested the fruits of victory, Hanjin said. "Forget it. That guy's already flown far away. It's too late to make a move now." Major Domo Gale shook his head. "What do you think of Nicholas' plan? He has a lot of guts. Will you really cooperate with him?" "I've already told the Dragon Knight. I'll cooperate. Unfortunately, Nicholas won't believe me." "How do you know he won't believe you?" "There are some things that Nicola definitely didn't ask him to say." Hanjin pondered for a moment, then slowly said, "For example, the news of the awakening of the Frost Dragon Ankiel. If Dragon City and Dragon Realm work together, all the traps I set before will be exposed by them one by one. Then they will suspect that I killed Green Zung and really send people to the Holy Crown City to investigate. Soon they will find out the truth. Then what? Even if they know, they won't come looking for trouble with us now. I'm talking about the aftermath of the war." Hanjin said softly, "After the Abyssal army is defeated, will we obtain peace?" "No. Dragon City and Dragon Realm hate me to the core, and Nicholas won't stop fighting either. Even if I join forces with Grand Duke Solomon, our strength is far inferior to theirs. In this case, how can I act according to Nicholas' plan?" "But you just said you will." "I will. But will Nicholas believe me? If it's him, will he act according to the plan? Then isn't the plan useless?" Major Domo Gale was stunned. "I don't care what he will do, but I will act according to the plan." Hanjin winked at Major Domo Gale. "This is also one of the Grand Duke's wishes. How can the Grand Duke interfere with the matter between you and Nicholas?" Major Domo Gale was more and more confused. "This has nothing to do with Nicholas." Hanjin said, "Even if Nicholas didn't make this plan, I would still do it. Besides, I've wanted to do it for a long time." Major Domo Gale gave up. Hanjin obviously didn't want to say. If he kept asking like this, he would never understand. So he simply looked elsewhere. Suddenly, a magic signal rose from the outskirts of Esnearly City. Hanjin stared at it for a moment and said, "Leonardo is back. I'll go out first." "Okay." Major Domo Gale nodded. A moment later, Hanjin's figure appeared in the outskirts. Leonardo came out from behind a tree and said respectfully, "Sir, you're here. How is it? What did you find out? Han Jin asked. About a dozen Wyvern Knight came over. They saw the magic signal and wanted to see what was going on. Seeing Han Jin here, they changed direction and flew back. The one leading the army is Prince Johnson and his demon squad, Leonardo said in a low voice. Prince Johnson? Han Jin frowned. Donald has a total of 2 brothers. Donald is the eldest, and he's also the strongest. The second is called Hanny, and the third is Johnson. Leonardo explained, in Donald's original plan, Hanny and Johnson would lead the army to attack the Grand Light Empire. Then, Donald would personally provide support from the rear. Later on, for some reason, Donald suddenly transferred Hanny out and let Johnson lead the army. You don't know why? Han Jin asked. He didn't doubt Leonardo, but he felt strange. I don't know. Leonardo shook his head and said, I've thought about it before, but I couldn't figure it out. What could be more important than attacking the Grand Light Empire? You didn't ask? What I should know, Donald will naturally tell me. What I shouldn't know, I'll only get scolded if I ask. Leonardo smiled. I know myself well enough. Han Jin was silent for a moment and changed the topic. Did they really attack the Holy Crown City? Yes. When do you think they'll arrive at the Holy Crown City? I've never been on this road. Leonardo smiled bitterly. It's okay. You can make an estimate. If they're fast, less than 2 days. If they're slow, it should be about 10 days. Han Jin was stunned. If it were Harley, he would have already hit him with his thunderbomb. If they were fast, it would take at least 2 days. If they were slow, it would take at least 10 days. Sir, Johnson is very violent. Not only the enemies, but also the demons are afraid of him. Besides, he has a demon squad with him. There should be more than 10 of them. This is a very powerful force. They can easily destroy the command center of most cities, even without the help of the army. Leonardo said, Johnson has just been defeated by Nicholas. I can't guess what he'll do. If he wants to vent his anger and knows that you've brought most of the strong men here, he'll probably only lead the demon squad to attack the Holy Crown City. If he can stay calm, or for some other reason, he may go with the army. In this way, it will take longer. Han Jin was lost in thought. If it was the former, it would be too late for him to go back now. Besides, he couldn't ignore Esnierly City. As long as he left, it was hard to guarantee that the fire tyrant Lonker would not come back. Leonardo, which situation do you think is more likely? Han Jin asked. He should go with the army. Leonardo said. Why? He's seriously injured, and the Vatican is in the Holy Crown City. Leonardo laughed. I think you already know that the Abyss demons are most afraid of the Vatican, not the strong men on the ground. The Vatican? Han Jin paused, then said in a low voice, I have an ascetic from the Vatican. Do you know him? Yes. I used to think that he was very, very powerful. But these days, I'm a little disappointed. Leonardo asked while observing Han Jin's expression. Ha! He's indeed not as powerful as I thought. Han Jin nodded with a smile. However, his Great Prayer spell and Great Blessing spell are extremely powerful and can bless thousands of warriors at once. But against the abyssal demons, no matter how powerful those warriors become, they won't be able to pose a threat to them. Han Jin was worried about the Holy Crown City. If Johnson really chose the former, could Jedis and Guevara stop the attack of the demon squad? He could only pin his hope on Lenin. He would not break his promise. If Lenin took action, then the fallen angel Catherine would also take action. Ha! My lord, light magic is not a threat to demons like me. But do you know what Great Blessing and Great Prayer mean to the Abyss demons? Leonardo said with a smile. The Abyss demons will also be blessed. But the result of the blessing is continuous bleeding, continuous pain, and their muscles will crack and even rot. Moreover, as long as the range of the magic light curtain is large enough, their teleportation will be meaningless. Oh, Han Jin also laughed. It seems that I should find an opportunity to let Adolf exercise more in the future. My lord, you are worried about the Holy Crown City, right? Leonardo asked. Yes, I've already sent the message. Your Holy Crown City will get the message first. What do you use to send the message? Han Jin asked. Usually, we will send a messenger. If there is an emergency, I will use it. Leonardo took out a crystal from his space ring. The shape of the crystal was a little strange, like a ball neatly cut in half from the middle. What is this? This is a resonance crystal, Leonardo said. You see, as long as I write a character on the mirror with my magic power, the character will appear on the other crystal, and the message will be sent. How many of these crystals do you have? 21 in total, Leonardo laughed, because the hell purple flower divides the whole continent into 21 districts. Who did you send a message to? Where is he? Han Jin asked. It was related to the safety of the Holy Crown City, so he must know clearly. I forgot the name. I have to check it. As for the location, he is in Tiger Stone Castle, the Acropolis of the Holy Crown City. Leonardo said. He will set off immediately after receiving the message. He should arrive at the Holy Crown City in 2 days. I have dealt with the hell purple flower in the Holy Crown City and caught many people. Why didn't I find this crystal? The one who controls the crystal is the pollen. His task is to leave the flower as early as possible and float in the air without being noticed. Once the flower is destroyed, he will float down, take root, and germinate. Leonardo laughed. My lord, your means must be very powerful. Our pollen doesn't dare to stay in the Holy Crown City, so we secretly moved to the Tiger Stone Castle. Speaking of this, there is one thing I don't understand. They're human beings. Why do they work for the Abyss race? Han Jin frowned and asked. Leonardo was silent for a moment and whispered, with wisdom, there will always be an irresistible attachment to life. God saw our shortcomings, so the God of light said, believe in me, and the one who believes in me will have eternal life. The God of death said, believe in me, and the one who believes in me will have immortality. Even the great Lich Denver used the same thing to bewitch his followers. He said, we don't rely on the sky, the earth, or the gods, but on our own. In fact, the followers need his guidance and rely on him. So he is a god, of course, a false god. Han Jin heaved a sigh of relief and didn't say anything. It's just a kind of belief, Leonardo said with a smile. Heaven is far away, and only souls can go there and have eternal life. The problem is, no soul has ever come back. No one knows what life in heaven is like. Maybe it's a very boring place. No drinking, no fighting, no playing with women. What's the difference between eternal life and death? In comparison, the God of Death promise is more realistic. They don't have to endure the pain of death. They can have a longer life and stronger body, even if it's just a few decades. Why would they refuse? Belief? Han Jin laughed, and then changed the topic. You have betrayed Donald. How can the hell purple flower obey your order? When Donald gave me the order, I already knew. There was no turning back, Leonardo said softly. That's why I destroyed everything I could. All of the resonance crystals are with me. Donald is now blind and deaf. He won't be able to control the purple hell flower in a short period of time. But the hell purple flowers are working for Donald after all. They have their own minds. Will they do as you say? Sir, I'm not a fool. Can I tell them the truth directly? Leonardo laughed. My order is that General Lang Ning of the Holy Crown City is on our side. Prince Johnson will attack the Holy Crown City in 10 days. Inform General Lang Ning to be ready to help. You're smart. Han Jin laughed. I've read some information about the Holy Crown City. With General Lang Ning's ability, he should be able to respond immediately. After that, Leonardo hesitated and said softly, Sir, I've recently received a piece of news, but I can't comment on its credibility. I don't know whether I should tell you or not. Tell me, what's the news? Great Lich Denver is taking action. He's taking action? Han Jin was shocked. The ground races had paid a great price to deal with the Abyss Demon Donald. If Great Lich Denver appeared again, it would be an unimaginable threat. It's strange that his target is not the Grand Light Empire, Dragon City, Dragonfield, Freedom Federation, or the Tribal Alliance. Where is his target? Han Jin asked. Is it the Holy Crown City? No, but it's not far away. Leonardo said, Denver is going to attack the Wild Willow City. Wild Willow City? Han Jin was stunned for a moment and asked confusedly, "What is he going to do there?" "I'm not sure." Leonardo smiled bitterly. "Sir, I can't even judge whether the news is true or not. How can I know? But I've heard that there's a holy relic of the undead in the Wild Willow City. If Denver really goes there, he must be trying to get it back." "A holy relic of the undead?" "Yes, sir," Leonardo said. Many years ago, one of Denver's disciples betrayed him and stole the holy relic. Denver was furious and even chased after him personally. But that disciple was very cunning. As soon as Denver came to the surface, that disciple fled back underground. When Denver chased him underground again, that disciple suddenly disappeared completely. Denver was furious and searched almost the entire Abyss world, but found nothing. During that period, many Abyss races were harassed by the undead creatures, and a war almost broke out. Han Jin's expression became very interesting. Denver's disciple? Did Harley do it? But with Harley's IQ, could he really be cunning? Or did Harley erase all his memories, so he became like this? What could be deduced was that, in just 2 years, Harley was able to gradually familiarize himself with Dao techniques and control the 5 elements array of the God of War. His talent and perception were both very good. Could this mean that Harley had a very interesting past? Sir? Leonardo saw that Han Jin did not speak for a long time and called out softly, "Cough, cough." Han Jin reacted. "You said that Denver is going to attack the Wild Willow City?" Yes. "Sir, are you joking?" Leonardo was stunned and asked tentatively, "Leonardo, there's something else I need you to do." Han Jin changed the topic. He was very satisfied with today's conversation, and he was also satisfied with Leonardo. Think about it. If this purple garden flower of hell did not surrender, he would not have been able to obtain so much information. It was said that if you know your enemy, you will be victorious. But in reality, it was very difficult to do so. "Sir, please tell me," Leonardo hurriedly said with a smile. Han Jin whispered a few words, and Leonardo's eyes widened. Finally, he rudely interrupted Han Jin. "Sir, you want to—" "Yes, I'll give you 5 days," Han Jin said. Chapter 538. In the blink of an eye, a few days had passed. Perhaps it was because of fear or other reasons. The flame tyrant Lonker had not made any moves. Thorn, the leader of the tribal alliance, had sent nearly 10,000 Wyvern Knights from the southern sky to investigate the situation around Esnearly City. They had even expanded the scope of their investigation to more than 100 miles, but they had not found anything. It seemed that the war had inexplicably ended. However, no one dared to be careless. The warriors of the tribal alliance were training under the leadership of Thorn in the southern sky every day. Green, on the other hand, was working day and night, focusing all his energy on the magic transmission array. He had to complete it within 10 days, or else the Holy Crown City would be in danger. The messengers sent by Kemoratsi returned to Esnearly City one after another. Han Jin's first battle in the Freedom Federation was a complete defeat for the Abyss Army. However, that was only a part of the army. There were still many Abyss soldiers attacking other cities of the Freedom Federation like locusts. The 3 parties held another meeting. There was no need to discuss whether they should send reinforcements or not. They had to save Esnearly City. Otherwise, what was the point of the Freedom Federation being left with only Esnearly City? As for how many troops to send, the 3 parties had different opinions. However, they quickly reached an agreement. Thorn in the Southern Sky sent 100,000 Bull Knights and 20,000 Wyvern Knights, while Esnearly City sent tens of thousands of people to form a coalition army. The city lord of Esnearly City, Snorley, was the commander. The rest of the army had to protect Esnearly City. Esnearly City was not only the capital of the Freedom Federation, but also a bridgehead in the war. If a straight line was drawn along Esnearly City, all the cities in the north would have fallen. Moreover, the Hell's Gate built by Donald was near Esnearly City. As long as the city could be defended, the Abyss race would not be able to advance at all. On this day, the wind was gentle and the sun was bright. As usual, the god of war floated quietly above Esnerly City. Harley stood at the bow of the ship, gazing into the distance. After a while, he suddenly sighed. I like the calm before the storm. Harley was not wrong. The Abyss race would not give up so easily. The battles in the future would definitely be more intense and more dangerous. Bao Bao turned his head and glanced at Harley. Seeing that he had successfully attracted Bao Bao's attention, Harley sighed even louder. Second brother, you don't understand. This is the realm. Do you know? It was the realm. Of course, you will mature sooner or later. When that day comes, you... Huh? What's that? A small dot appeared in the sky, and it seemed to be shooting toward them. Baby's eyesight was much better than Harley's. He had already seen it. After observing it for a moment, he suddenly shook his wings and let out a high-pitched cry. To be able to attract Bao Bao's attention, this proved that the other party's strength was not to be underestimated. The god of war immediately entered a state of combat readiness. Hogan and the two magisters from the Phoenix Legion controlled the demon annihilation crossbows and aimed at the direction that the figure was flying from. As soon as the figure entered the shooting range, they would be able to lock onto it immediately. Dominique slowly stood up and walked to the side of the ship. The Titans also followed her. Only Garen was still busy at the magic transmission array. He was a workaholic like Yelena. When he was really focused on something, he would not be able to sense the movements of the outside world. Hanjin was reading the book that Grand Duke Solomon had given him. He let out a soft, huh, and looked around before returning to the book. However, countless purple stars suddenly appeared and surrounded his body. Finally, they condensed into a long sword that stood behind him like a flagpole. The figure was getting closer and closer. It paused in the sky for a moment, then landed directly on the god of war. Harley immediately rushed to the main seat and was about to activate the 5 elements formation. Harley, Hanjin called out softly. Master. Harley's gaze hurriedly turned to Hanjin. Hanjin did not speak again. He just shook his head and continued reading his book. The next moment, the figure had already landed on the god of war. It was a woman that could not be described. Almost all beautiful women had their own strengths and weaknesses. For example, Yelena was good in every aspect, but she was slightly short. Although her figure was exquisite, it did not make her look sexy. For example, Sunir was very tall and had a voluptuous figure. However, because she had been practicing archery for many years, her arms were much thicker than those of ordinary women. There was also the fallen angel Catherine. Although she was beautiful, she lacked vitality when she talked and laughed. Her eyes also lacked spirit and seemed stiff. The woman who landed from the sky gave people a feeling of unreal perfection. She was neither tall nor short, neither fat nor thin. Although she was wearing a white dress that reached her feet, one could still see that she had a graceful figure and a pair of slender legs. Her face was extremely clean. There were no wrinkles, no spots, no blotches, and no flaws. It was like a painting. Her eyebrows were not faint willow leaf eyebrows, nor were they dashing eyebrows that were full of heroic spirit. They were like a pair of crescent moons. Together with her ocean blue eyes, she looked particularly gentle and beautiful. After the woman landed, she did not look at Hanjin. Instead, she turned around and looked at Green. Green was busy working on the magic transmission array. Suddenly, he sensed something and his body stiffened. Then, he slowly turned around. Hogan was busy controlling the demon annihilation crossbow. When he saw the woman, he was stunned. His mouth was wide open and saliva almost flowed out. This guy was lustful when he was young, and it didn't seem to have changed for the better even after several decades. In his current state, if the woman suddenly attacked him, he could only wait for death. The woman turned around again. This time, her eyes fell on Hanjin. Green could only see his back. He frowned inexplicably. Are you Raphael? The woman smiled at Hanjin. The woman's smile was also very beautiful. It was indescribable. If one were to say that she was flirtatious, then her temperament was as clear as the purest spring water. If one were to say that she was pure, then her eyes and smile were full of charm. "And who are you?" Han Jin asked calmly. He still did not raise his head. "You don't know me." The woman's gaze fell on Han Jin's hands. Then she asked curiously, "What are you looking at?" "Books." "What books?" "Useful books." "What are useful books?" Han Jin did not know how to explain. He slowly raised his head and glanced at the woman. Then he pushed the books over. "Read for yourself." The woman's eyes moved and fell on the long sword behind Han Jin. Then she walked towards Han Jin step by step. Her steps were very steady and elegant. It seemed that she did not care about the threat that Han Jin could pose. In a few breaths, the woman had walked to the table. She slowly reached out and picked up the book. She flipped through the first few pages and then turned to the last page. Then she said, "Is this book good?" "Yes. I thought that you would have learned these things when you were very young," the woman said softly. "I'm very stupid," Han Jin said calmly. "Is that so?" The woman slowly put down the book and looked up at the sky. Then she said slowly, "My friends are here too." A few more dots appeared in the sky and flew towards the god of war. In a few moments, they had landed on the deck. There were 4 of them in total. On the god of war, the others were fine, but Green Zheng's body was stiff. His expression was complicated, and he was gasping for air. It was as if something was pressing down on his chest. "Lord Raphael, long time no see." Shazos, the guardian of Dragon City, laughed loudly. "How many months has it been?" Han Jin smiled and stood up. He glanced at the newcomers. Other than Shazos, there was also Contract, the guardian of Dragon City, and Elder Xavier. He did not recognize the other person. However, from the way they stood, he seemed to be with Xavier. "Lord Shazos, Lord Contract, Lord Xavier, I heard that Black Dragon King Valentine is clenching his teeth and is going to fight you to the death. Why do you have time to come here? By the way, Lord Xavier, your injury, how is it?" "It's just a small injury." "It's not a big deal," Xavier said with a smile. Han Jin deliberately mentioned Xavier's injury to verify his guess. Although Xavier's smile was normal, when he mentioned his injury, a sharp light flashed in his eyes. "That's good. I've been worried about you." Han Jin knew what was going on. Moreover, Shazos and the others did not look back at Green after landing. It was obvious that they were deliberately avoiding him. "Lord Raphael, let me introduce you. This is the person I mentioned to you before, Frost Dragon Ankiel." Shazos smiled and said, "Lord Ankiel's flying speed is too fast. She pulled us far away." "Ha! I hope we didn't disturb you." "I can't be more happy to have friends from afar." Han Jin smiled and gave the magicians a look. He then said, "Please sit, please sit." A few magicians hurriedly walked over and cleared 2 tables. They were all magicians of the Undying Bird Army. It was ridiculous to have a magician as a servant. "Lord Shazos, how is the situation on your side?" Han Jin asked. "It's not optimistic, but I believe we will be the victors," Shazos said. Han Jin pondered. In fact, if a black dragon and a gold dragon of the same rank fought, the gold dragon would definitely be the one to be beaten to a pulp. A black dragon was immune to all magic, but it did not affect its ability to cast magic. On the other hand, a gold dragon could only rely on its claws to fight. It was obvious who had the upper hand. However, if Dragon City and Dragon Realm were in a passive situation, how could Shazos and the other guardians and elders have the energy to run around? They should stay in Dragon City and Dragon City to fight Black Dragon King Valentine to the death. "Lord Shazos, you didn't come here just to see me, right?" Han Jin said slowly. "I know you are all busy, and so am I. In that case, let's be straightforward." Han Jin knew that Frost Dragon Ankiel was the one who had the final say. Ankiel had 1 table to himself, while the other 4 had gathered around another table. This was very clear. He had chosen Shazos purely on purpose. Sure enough, Shazos smiled and did not say anything. His gaze then fell on Ankiel. "Lord Raphael, I feel that the atmosphere is a little tense." After a moment of silence, Ankiel spoke again. "We have no ill intentions. Don't worry. To be honest, Lord Shazos and I have different viewpoints. Donald has been accumulating strength, while our continent has been in chaos for years. Our overall strength has fallen to the lowest point, and the church has been destroyed. Donald chose to start a war at this time, which is very disadvantageous for us. Moreover, no one can see through the fog of war and predict the future. Ha! What the future will be like will require you, me, him, and all the lives on the continent to work together and fight together, right? That's right, Han Jin replied softly. As the guardians of the continent, the dragons have the responsibility and obligation to help all the brave warriors who struggle unyieldingly. Enkiel's eyes moved, and then his tone became more serious. We are here to provide you with assistance. I like hearing that. Han Jin smiled. It invigorates one's spirit. I wonder, what assistance can you provide us? Enkiel was stunned. Not only could she release wind and snow magic, but she also had a frost domain. She was also very intelligent. Han Jin had told her that he liked hearing that sentence. The meaning behind it was clear that he did not like to hear anything else. It was all nonsense. However, Enkiel did not dwell on this matter. She thought for a moment and slowly said, "We can send 30 gold dragons to assist you in battle." How many? This time, it was Han Jin's turn to be stunned. 30. Enkiel raised 3 fingers. Although it's not a lot, we've already done our best. Han Jin looked deeply at Enkiel. This gift was too heavy, and he could not accept it. I hope you won't refuse. Enkiel slowly turned her head, and her gaze fell on the Titans. The gold dragons will bring you many benefits. For example, these Titans are the descendants of the Thunder God. They have a glorious bloodline and are the most valiant warriors in the world. But on this ship, they can't display their strength. Have you thought about it? If every Titan had a gold dragon as their companion, how terrifying would they be? In addition to the gold dragons, we have also prepared many small gifts for you. Guardian Shazot smiled. Let's not talk about other things. Do you remember the last time we chatted? I repeatedly told you that you must get a few holy items from Elder Xavier. Han Jin was silent for a moment, and then slowly nodded. Of course I remember. Elder Xavier. Shazot looked at Xavier. Although Xavier had been controlling himself, he finally lost his composure at this moment. Among all the treasures in the entire Dragon City, the gifts he was about to present were definitely one of the best. Soon, they would no longer belong to him or Dragon City. That kind of pain could not be described with words. The first thing Xavier took out was a war hammer that was more than 4 feet long. Compared to Yelena's melon hammer, this war hammer was shorter. The shape of the hammer was also different. The melon hammer was round, but this war hammer looked like 2 cones glued together. As Xavier unlocked the seal on the war hammer, a dazzling electric light gushed out from the war hammer and rushed straight to the sky. Arcs of electricity swept wildly across the god of war, causing the Thunderbirds on both sides of the ship to let out excited cries. I've said before that although the Mjolnir can be used as a weapon, it is also a very powerful magic staff. The lightning released by the Mjolnir has a 100% chance of releasing a paralyzing effect. You should know what this means. Ha! Shazot laughed. It can't be better to give it to Miss Yelena as an engagement token. Xavier took out a longbow. The color of the longbow was a little green, but in the dim green light, there were countless black dots constantly flickering. Sometimes they connected together, sometimes they scattered into a group of stars. This gave people a strange feeling, as if the longbow had its own life and was breathing. The instant Xavier took out his longbow, a series of faint, ghostly wails and howls abruptly resounded. Along with the flickering of the black spots, the pitch of the howls fluctuated from time to time. This is prepared for your other fiancée, Miss Sunier. Shazot whispered. The howling bow, it can completely disrupt the mind power of the strong. Without mind power, what can they do? Ha! They can only wait for death. I'm sure that it won't be long before Miss Sunier becomes the most terrifying mage killer in the world. The atmosphere became extremely quiet. Enkiel, Shazot, and the others were all staring at Han Jin. However, their gazes were different. Some were curious, some were indifferent, and some looked like they were waiting to watch a good show. What they all had in common was that they were full of confidence. Could you refuse? Could you bear to refuse? The dragon race had stood at the top of the continent for too long. They had a rich collection, and the golden bullet attack was also aggressive and determined to win. Yelena and Sunir, who had gathered on the deck, stared blankly at the two divine weapons. They really wanted them, especially Sunir. In the previous battles, she had only seen Yelena's glory, but she couldn't help. She had been waiting for an opportunity. The howling bow could greatly increase her lethality, so how could she be willing to miss it? I know, there's no free lunch in this world, Han Jin said slowly. Tell me frankly, what do you need me to do? You should know what we want. Enkiel smiled. I'll only know if you tell me, Han Jin replied. It's very simple. In order to resist the attack of the black dragons, we need someone's help. Enkiel whispered, Mr. Zhenglin, the demon annihilation crossbow, made by Mr. Zhenglin, can not only kill golden dragons, but also black dragons. Do you understand? From Enkiel's perspective, she had already given Han Jin enough face. She didn't say that she would hand the criminal Zhenglin over to them, but only that she needed help. Of course, Han Jin had no right to interfere with how Zhenglin would be treated after returning to the Dragon Realm, and whether he would really work hard to resist the attack of the Black Dragons. When Chazos and Harriet had negotiated with Nicholas about the Demon Annihilation crossbow, their attitude was much tougher than it was now. Han Jin's treatment had already surpassed Nicholas. Chapter 539. No one spoke, and the deck was so quiet that even the sound of breathing could be heard clearly. Although Enkiel's request sounded unexpected, it was actually reasonable. Perhaps increasing Grimm's title as a great sorcerer was nothing in the eyes of these dragons, but his incomparable wisdom was completely worth the price tag. 2 sacred items and 30 gold royals. This kind of reward could no longer be described as generous. Enkiel's generous offer also showed her attitude. She was determined to get it. Yelena and Sunir looked at Han Jin worriedly. This was a difficult choice. Regardless of whether Han Jin agreed or refused, he would lose something. If he refused, not only would he not be able to get the holy tools and help, but it would also mean that he would be standing on the opposite side of the dragons, which was definitely not a wise decision. Han Jin's strength was not strong enough to ignore the frost dragons. However, accepting was also not a good idea. Zhenglin's fate in the hands of the dragons was foreseeable. The dragons would not give Han Jin another chance to let Zhenglin leave alive. After being together for so long, the people on the God of War were already familiar with Zhenglin's existence. No one could bear to hand this old man over to the dragons. However, no one had the right to speak on this matter. Zhenglin was saved by Han Jin, so the final decision was in Han Jin's hands. No one knew when Zhenglin had stopped what he was doing. Although he was still standing straight, his stiff back and slightly trembling fingertips revealed the tension and sadness in his heart. It had been a few years. The last time he walked slowly to hell in a similar atmosphere. Why? He could not control his own fate. A Grand Magus was already an unattainable existence for ordinary people, but he was still not the top of the world. The powerful Big Three of the Abyss were still restricted in all aspects. In fact, this was a very simple matter. At present, Zhenglin's greatest value was reflected in the Demon Annihilation crossbow. Since he already had the blueprint, handing over Zhenglin alone would be exchanged for 2 sacred items and 30 gold royals. This was a fair deal. Enkiel looked at Han Jin with a smile on her eyes. She seemed to enjoy this process. Based on her countless years of experience, the young man in front of her would not be able to resist such a great temptation. After a long time, Han Jin took a deep breath and a smile appeared on his face. Enkiel also smiled. Humans were always the most hypocritical existences. There were countless reasons for them to fall. The key was whether they could find a suitable excuse for them. However, Han Jin's words surprised everyone. I really didn't know that the Demon Annihilation crossbow was so valuable. Han Jin smiled happily, as if he had gotten a great bargain. No problem, you can take all the Demon Annihilation crossbows on the God of War. Ankiel was stunned and slowly withdrew her smile. You can't be serious, right? You just said that this war requires our joint efforts. The Black Dragon King Valentine's target is you. In comparison, you need the Demon Annihilation crossbows more. You see, I am a person who takes the big picture into consideration. Han Jin cleverly tied the topic to the Demon Annihilation crossbows, not mentioning Zhonglin at all. You can't really think that these Demon Annihilation crossbows can be exchanged for the two sacred items, right? Ankiel laughed. Or do you think that they're more powerful than 30 gold royals? Han Jin leaned forward and asked with a little surprise. You think it's too little? But we can only make so many. You also know that this thing is very difficult to make. At present, there are only a few left. At this point, Ankiel could finally be sure that this young human in front of her was playing dumb. She wanted to be angry, but she had to fully consider the consequences. To be able to refuse such a temptation, not only did one need to have a steady heart, but also great courage. Not everyone dared to refuse the request of the dragon race. At least, Nicholas did not dare, not now. Ankiel began to admire Han Jin. Of course, admiration did not mean a good impression. An enemy would always be an enemy. However, as a powerhouse born in the same era as the Black Dragon King Valentine and the Gold Dragon King Milu, she was very open-minded. Ankiel would never be stingy in affirming the character and merits of her opponents. Because of the different heights, the style of doing things was naturally different. Some people like to exaggerate the stupidity of their opponents after defeating them, so as to show their brilliance and righteousness. In fact, this had the opposite effect. Those who defeated a fierce tiger were warriors. What was the point of defeating an idiot? Are you really determined to do this? I don't want anyone to have regrets. Although Ankiel knew that Han Jin would not change his decision, she could not help but ask, Do you know what I'm most afraid of? Han Jin softly asked, What are you afraid of? Heart. Heart. Ankiel did not quite understand. Han Jin smiled. He did not explain too much. As the saying went, Bodhisattvas are afraid of causes, and mortals are afraid of consequences. Any knot in his heart could become an obstacle on his path of cultivation. Lord Raphael, you really won't regret it? Chazos could not help but ask. Today, they had used such a large sum to bribe Han Jin. This was the result of a careful discussion between the elders of Dragon City and the guardians of Dragonfield. There was a series of hidden plans. Although Han Jin's strength was unfathomable, he had only been famous for a short time. His sphere of influence had expanded too quickly, and his unstable foundation was Han Jin's weakness. They wanted to use such a large gift in exchange for Zhonglin, not only to eliminate future threats, but also to leave a stain on Han Jin's reputation. If necessary, they could magnify that stain infinitely. If they could betray Zhonglin today, they could betray anyone tomorrow. Then, would Grand Duke Solomon of the Capital of Elements, Chasam of Cold Shadow City, Mali Shin of Depew City, the Elves, and now the Freedom Federation and the Horde Alliance continue to trust Han Jin? All the lords on the continent were professional experts, but not all professional experts could become lords. This was because, in addition to talent in combat, many other abilities were also required. Affinity, cohesion, the ability to gain the sincere support and trust of the subordinates, and so on were all very important factors. If they really wanted to get hold of Han Jin's weakness, they had too many little tricks to use. Unfortunately, Han Jin actually rejected them. This was something they had never expected. Could it be that their sacrifice was not enough to move the other party? This is not a matter of regret. Han Jin smiled and said, If you want to exchange our Demon Annihilation crossbows, I can make the decision, but Mr. Zhonglin should have the final say on where he wants to go and what he wants to do. I'm not a human trafficker. Ankiel could no longer hold it in and laughed out loud. She immediately felt that it was a little rude and immediately covered her mouth with her hand. Perhaps it was from the bottom of her heart, but that charming and slightly naughty smile blossomed on her beautiful face. It was a kind of soul-stirring beauty. Although it was just a flash in the pan, it was enough to mesmerize anyone who saw it. Even with Han Jin's rock-solid state of mind, He couldn't help but fall into a trance for a moment. As for Hogan and the others, needless to say, if Ankiel had smiled at him, he would probably have fainted from excitement. Such an open and honest Sir Raphael. I feel like a stranger. Chazos laughed and said, "Huh? Who is that Raphael who asked me to attack the Vatican and steal the Saint crystals?" Although Chazos was smiling, there was no doubt that his words had shed all pretense of cordiality. Chazos's gaze also fell on Adolf, observing his reaction. "The Saint crystals originally belonged to me, but I couldn't convince Jeds, so I had to think of another way," Han Jin said indifferently. "Oh, right. I forgot to say thank you at that time." Adolf's expression didn't change, as if he hadn't heard anything. Chazos was very disappointed and was about to speak again when Ankiel suddenly said, "All right, Chazos, you have lost." Chazos closed his mouth and slowly leaned back in his chair. Looking at Han Jin's calm expression, he knew that he had indeed lost because he couldn't keep his cool. "No one has ever rejected me before," Ankiel said slowly. "So, I'm your first." Han Jin smiled and said, "I'm honored." The surrounding people were all dumbfounded. The negotiations had already collapsed, and the air was filled with the smell of gunpowder. At this time, Han Jin actually dared to tease Ankiel. The initiator only realized that it was a double entendre after he said it. A faint apologetic look appeared on his face, and then he shrugged. Han Jin couldn't be bothered to apologize. This time, Ankiel fell into a long silence. Then the air gradually became cold, and the water vapor exhaled by the people on the ship became clear. "Are you cold?" Ankiel asked softly. "I'm fine." Han Jin smiled faintly, then reached out and gently grasped the long sword. Han Jin's action was in order. There was a commotion on the ship. The Titans, led by Dominique, immediately got into a battle formation. Spencer and the Phoenix Magisters controlled the Demon Annihilation crossbows. Adolf slowly put on the Hellfire gauntlets, and even Hogan woke up from his daze. He didn't even bother to wipe the saliva from the corner of his mouth, and immediately grabbed the crystal ball behind the ballista with his right hand. "I'm cold too. Let's play a little game. It'll be much better if we exercise," Ankiel said. "A little game?" Han Jin emphasized the word little. He knew that Ankiel had other intentions. "Yes, the situation is a little special now. It's not good to be exhausted," Ankiel said. "Since you've already rejected me, shouldn't you at least show me what qualifications you have?" Ankiel asked. "All right." Han Jin nodded. Ankiel had made it very clear that they had their own enemies to deal with. They shouldn't fight to the death at this time. The number of people was limited to the two of them. Between Han Jin and Ankiel, the scale wouldn't be large because it was just a little game. "I was the first to master the frost domain on this continent. I gave it a very nice name," Ankiel said softly. "Deep Blue." With that, Ankiel slowly stood up and sat across from Han Jin. She reached out with her white fingertips and grabbed the crystal cup in front of Han Jin. Her other hand slowly swept across the crystal cup, and as if performing magic, the crystal cup actually turned azure. The next moment, Ankiel slowly pushed the crystal cup back. "Drink it, and our previous grievances can be written off." The table in front of Han Jin creaked under the pressure. Layers of frost spread rapidly with the cup as the center. In just a few breaths of time, the table had turned silver white and was covered with a layer of frost. What was even more strange was that the frost continued to spread along the legs of the table and rush to the deck. Seeing this, Harley hurriedly activated the defensive array of the 5 elements primordial fire. The silvery white layer on the deck quickly melted, but the table in front of Han Jin was still covered in a layer of frost. The 4 legs of the table alternated between a pale green color and a silvery white color. Obviously, the two were in a fierce competition. Han Jin and Ankiel each had their own advantages and disadvantages. From Han Jin's point of view, to deal with this extreme cold, he had to release fire magic that could produce high temperatures. However, the others on the God of War's ship could not withstand it. From Ankiel's point of view, everything started with a cup of cold water. In order to avoid misunderstanding with Han Jin, She did not release the frost domain and only used a negligible amount of power. Can we really write it off? Hanjin smiled. If I say we can, then we can. Enkiel's tone was full of confidence. Clearly, she had a huge influence on the Golden Dragon race. What? You don't dare to drink it? Don't worry, it's just a cup of very ordinary water. After a long time, you'll understand me. I can't do such a despicable thing. This is a new little game, Han Jin said leisurely. I suddenly understand what you mean by heart just now. Strong people like us must maintain a magnanimous heart. Even if we do something bad, we must do it righteously. Otherwise, once we have doubts and guilt about ourselves or our actions, we will go downhill. That's right. Han Jin laughed. That's why I often find excuses for myself. What about now? Are you looking for an excuse to refuse this cup of water? Don't forget, I have the life puppet. Is there a need to refuse? Han Jin gently picked up the crystal cup. As soon as his fingertips touched the frost quickly spread up his arm. Han Jin frowned. You just said that this is your frost domain? I believe that the Abyss Demon Donald and the others will have a headache if they meet you. After all, the Abyss Demons were close combat troops. The so-called domain, as the name suggested, was a magical boundary filled with rapid, freezing air. With the Abyss Demon's resistance, it was difficult for them to get close to Ankiel, let alone attack her. I've already met them. Ankiel's smile contained some pride. However, the guy leading them is very smart. I couldn't catch up to him. So you've killed the other Abyss Demons? Han Jin suddenly thought of the second Prince Hanny that Leonardo had told him about. Could it be that Hanny had left the battlefield to lead his team to attack Ankiel? If you have the chance, you are welcome to come to the Lost Valley to see the ice sculptures I made. Ankiel smiled. I'll definitely go. Han Jin raised the crystal cup and drank it in one gulp. Han Jin had been stalling for time. He already knew that the Frost Dragon Ankiel's identity and strength were not inferior to the two Dragon Kings. The frost water that represented Ankiel's highest achievement was definitely not to be underestimated. Moreover, Ankiel had asked him to drink the frost water. She had only used a negligible amount of strength, so it was fair for him to use his own body to dissolve it. Vital energy circulated wildly in Han Jin's body. As soon as he swallowed the frost water, he felt that the water had turned into a sharp sword, and there was even a slight pain. Han Jin was secretly shocked. This frost domain was not simple. What he practiced was the path of indestructible golden body. To put it simply, it was the path of sanctification. Although his body's defensive power was not as strong as that of a black dragon or a gold dragon, it was still much stronger than ordinary professionals. Warriors like Guevara completely relied on their combat chi to protect themselves. Once their combat chi was broken, death would be imminent. If it had been anyone else on the God of War who drank the frost water, they would have been turned into an ice sculpture. Although the frost released by Ankiel was very sharp, Han Jin was fully prepared. Pain naturally meant that his body had suffered a certain amount of damage. Ankiel was looking at Han Jin, Yelena, and Sunir were also looking at Han Jin. Everyone's eyes were focused on Han Jin. After drinking the frost water, Han Jin continued to read the book as if nothing had happened. In fact, he had been trying his best to wrap the frost water with his vital energy and control it. It was just that he didn't show it on his face. After an unknown amount of time, Ankiel smiled. As expected, what's wrong? Han Jin slowly raised his head. I didn't sense any elemental fluctuations. Ankel smiled. It seems like you were able to neutralize all the cold with just the heat of your body. Is it difficult? Han Jin smiled. It's not difficult, it's impossible. Ankiel slowly stood up. What do you mean? Han Jin was stunned. Well, since Lord Raphael doesn't want to make a deal with us, we can only go back with our tails between our legs. Ankiel changed the topic. When Xavier heard this, he hurriedly reached for Mjolnir and Howling Bow on the table. Ankiel frowned. Xavier? Don't think about taking back the gifts you've already given. This isn't a gift. Xavier was stunned. Put it down, Ankiel said in an indisputable tone. She then turned to Han Jin. Lord Raphael, I don't know what happened to you in the past that made you hate the dragon so much. But I want to tell you that just like how you and Nicholas are two completely different people, the temperament of the dragons is also very different. You can't extend your hatred for one or a few lone wolves to the entire race. It won't do you any good. Hanjin didn't know what to say. He had rejected the deal, so he didn't want to leave Mjolnir and Howling Bow behind. The tyrannical dragons knew to consider the big picture and try their best to avoid conflict. He still had this bit of integrity. But why did she want to give him Mjolnir and Howling Bow as gifts? Was this woman a fool? Or was she scheming something? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.